Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September Committee of the Whole. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of the, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Section 2, appearance of visitors. We do not have any this morning. We'll go to Section 3, administration. Mrs. Bush.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item, 3.01 on our agenda this morning is a report on summer trainings. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. As Cap comes forward to give you a report on that, we do extensive training every summer, primarily to support the induction of new employees, to advance skills of current employees, and to build leadership within our system. And I believe this summer we had a little over 18,000 participants in those sessions. Now we have about 11,000 employees, so obviously there are people who participated in more than one training or more than one session. So Ms. Cap's going to share that with you. It's one of the primary focuses of our summer work. Ms. Cap?
Thank you, Dr. Royster, and good morning to the Board of Trustees. Thank you for hearing that summer report. As Dr. Royster mentioned,
Yes, sir. As Dr. Royster mentioned to you, Greenville County Schools provides extensive opportunity to develop personnel in every area of our district. We want for each employee a strong start and support, ongoing skill advancement, and opportunities to develop leadership, all of which lead to employee retention and quality results. This summer, in over 1,100 sessions, we seated nearly 18,500 participants. Those participants were credited 80,000 hours in recertification or job skill enhancement, nearly doubling the hours credited in the summer of 2021. Today, I'm going to highlight training aligned to district priorities, most of it provided through in-house expertise and available in multiple ways. We trust that you will share in the feel in the accomplishments of our personnel. Our assistant superintendents kicked off the summer hosting school principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches, supporting collaboration and strong planning for fall. Their focus was on instructional and cultural leadership strategies. Back face-to-face, our summer academy held 276 sessions. Over 1,100 persons earned 8,000 hours of credit. Focus of our sessions is on the instructional protocol, the classroom essentials to challenge and support every student. The next several slides capture the sessions with the highest participation. The classroom environment must be conducive to learning. 390 participants in 42 sessions gained a shared understanding of student challenges and the strategies to ensure that each can be successful. A teacher must not only know their content, but understand the strengths and needs of their students. Over 40 sessions supported these essentials, seating 374 participants. 187 participants in 25 Summer Academy sessions deepened their ability to assess student progress and fit instruction to challenge and support them. Over 1,000 participants were seated across 120 sessions devoted to instructional delivery, strategies, rigor, and engagement. An additional 51 sessions served over 500 participants and supported school leaders and support staff to effectively serve our teachers and students. There were leadership sessions, specialized support for students, school counselor sessions, student services, and our customer service training. The first session was held this summer for 24 new front office personnel. Our two-day Upstate Technology Conference continues to be a favorite. 336 persons attended this year, earning over 3,400 hours of credit. Each year, with the support of our sponsors, the UTC boasts nationally recognized speakers, and like Summer Academy, is a high-energy event focused on proven instructional practices. Throughout the summer, district specialists and department leaders provided 122 sessions to advance the knowledge and skills of teachers and leaders, ensuring flexible access to preparation for the school year. These sessions served over 2,500 participants who earned nearly 17,000 hours of credit. You'll notice support for our summer school program there and multi-day sessions equipping teachers to effectively challenge and prepare all students. Principals and instructional coaches are also actively planning and developing staff in the summer to meet their school's distinct priorities. 292 sessions were delivered at school sites or with school faculties. 4,800 participants were there in each of those seats, and over 17,000 hours were credited. This was double the number of opportunities available through our schools for their faculties in 2021. Professional learning opportunities are also provided through grants and community partnerships. Smart Arts pairs artists with teachers in integrated units. Science Plus advances the skills of teachers statewide here at Roper Mountain. Clemson's program is elevating STEM teacher effectiveness, and the Literacy Association supports best practices in reading and writing. Our 2022 Summer Gate Institute prepared 70 new teachers for our classrooms, roughly 22% of all first-year teachers in the district. 23 of these new teachers are special education teachers, an area we added this school year. In 15 days of this pre-service institute, teachers learned alongside their coach and joined others new to their schools for the Induction Institute. Institute strands are listed here, and their training continues across the school year as well. The Induction Institute promotes a strong start and the highest new teacher pay in the state. A total of 579 teachers committed over 12,000 hours in the Induction Institute over 4 days and began their school year equipped and inspired to support their learners. Author Annette Bro encourages a new group every year with practical recommendations for the classroom. Just before students arrive with all staff back at work on a single day, teachers collaborate in district-wide professional learning. Over 2,500 teachers participated in 68 sessions, earning nearly 6,500 hours recertification credit in one day. Sessions include strategies and instructional tools and an all-arts collaboration event. Dr. Royster previously shared with you some of the work that our operational and support offices conducted this summer. Though we missed out on custodial college for the previous 2 summers, we returned this summer to greet an enthusiastic and appreciative group, and here are some of the highlights of their work together. He also shared with you the training provided by our transportation partner. You'll see below those numbers the content in recertification and training of drivers, coaches, aides, and substitutes. Our Food and Nutrition Services Department certified assistant managers and provided back-to-school preparation for managers. All of this while serving 133,000 summer meals. Finance and Human Resources, those departments with tremendously interrelated work, provide multiple trainings for all job levels. They oriented all new principals, secretaries, and bookkeepers, and 700 substitutes refreshed or trained anew to prepare for the year. Secretaries are increasing their efficiency using Google applications, and multiple update trainings were held on our personnel management tools. You will likely recall a two-day event conducted by the Greenville County Sheriff's Office in partnership with our security personnel. 206 persons participated in this two-day event that included live scenarios and direct prevention and response training. You'll see much of the content there that was provided to those participants. Our partnership with Greenville Technical College continues, equipping supervisors for increasing responsibilities in leadership and in management. 37 thus far have earned supervisory certificates, and 9 are now certified in leadership and management through these 6-day-long seminars. Human resources and Lean Six Sigma credentials are accumulating as well. A number of summer sessions focus on leadership capacity building for both teachers and current administrators. Experienced teachers learn to support new teachers and to develop their own coaching and leadership skills, while administrators extend their capacity for instructional leadership. Mr. Nance leads all ADs, or athletic directors, to national certification as well. Our principal pipeline now boasts a 2-year partnered preparation program, leading to an educational leadership degree and credential. We have seated 19 in our first cohort, selected in partnership with Clemson University. These folks in the cohort will benefit from customized content and field experiences, learning from Greenville County Schools leaders, and tuition assistance. We have 11 new principals in our principal induction program. Our summer sessions focus on orientation and building a 100-day plan to support principals such that they start strong and continue through the year. As we continue through the year, we will develop further their management, communication, and instructional leadership skills. 21 experienced principals right now are mentoring first and second year principals. Dr. Royster shared with you earlier the distinct focus for this school year launched in his leadership summit. We know that when we demonstrate our commitment to students through high expectations, relationships, and engagement, that they will thrive in school. As principals work together to consider the application of that understanding at their own school sites, we ask students directly, how do you know your school believes in you? It's done the same to me again. You got it? Okay.
My math teacher, she had such a kind heart and such patience with me, and by the end of her class, I was able to solve problems that I couldn't even fathom doing.
Someone you could just lean on, someone you could connect to. It's like someone that's there for you, the teacher that you could just go to if you're having a bad day.
If you normally make C's and you make a B on a test and your teacher goes, wow, you did an exceptional job on your test, you did better than normal. You know, it'll give you some motivation to, you know, I want to make all B's now and then move from B's to A's.
My teacher, she was my 5th grade teacher. She was, to this day, the best teacher that I've ever had.
She was so happy all the time and uplifting and smiling 100% of the time during her day.
She would help me out anytime I needed it. She would host her after school tutorings every chance she got, and it was just like, wow, this woman actually cares.
Thank you, and I am happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation, and needless to say, it was very short compared to the amount of hours and work that went on this summer. I think we could probably take each one of those slides and focus the whole committee of the whole on just what went on in each one of the trainings and workshops. And so I would refer anybody out there in the future that ever says, you know, I wish I was in education because they get the whole summer off. Please refer them to this slide so that they can see how busy all of our employees are. Everyone is in the district. And that last one, I think, says it all, believe in every student. So the floor is now open for questions. You left them speechless, Angie. Miss Mosley.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit disjointed here because I was trying to write down and listen at the same time. Can you elaborate on the best practices in literacy that I'm looking at, I don't know what slide number, maybe 13. It says at the bottom, Greenville County Literary Association, and then it says best practices in literacy and practical ideas to increase student achievement. I know we're going to look at some of that achievement later today, and I'm pleased that we are above state average, but I would like to see growth in that area. So I would really like to know more about what that involves and what is our approach to this.
So distinctly for this particular partner-provided training, it is for their members only. It was provided at Thomas E. Kearns Elementary School. There were book studies on literacy and how to best support students. Their literacy strategies align to the strategies of Greenville County Schools, and they simply are supporting their own members in that partnership on that site during the summer. So they are aligned to our strategies in Greenville County.
Okay, so what do you mean by members?
The Greenville County Literacy Association actually has a membership.
Okay.
And those members are teachers in our schools.
Teachers in our schools that are members of the association?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this training was specifically for them?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And aligned to our tools. It's an opportunity for that group to collaborate together around those strategies.
Okay, so what is the method of literacy instruction that we embrace here in Greenville County Schools right now?
I'll probably ask Mr. McCoy to say it in a more succinct way.
Okay.
But we take a comprehensive approach to literacy, to phonics, word study, reading and writing. I'll let him answer if that's okay.
So the core, it's a modified, I'd say, balanced literacy model we've used for the last 12 or 13 years, I believe. I have to go back and look and see when that was first switched over from 4-block. But then over the years, you might look at, you can't really look at a true balanced literacy model because we do embed certain things in that model we feel we're missing from that model. So some of those components that Karen named, we certainly do phonics and word study, guided reading, interactive read aloud. I think we presented on that before a while ago, but is a components structure to that balanced literacy model. Those big components of reading, basically, for elementary K through 5.
Okay. I might have more questions about that later, but okay, thank you for clarifying that. So my second question, or my next question, goes back to, oh my goodness, let me find it. I saw several bullet points that were talking about special education, whether it was like IEPs or strategies to support special education. Can you clarify more about what that involved for me?
I might call on support to clarify succinctly what that involves. I will say to you that throughout the summer, whether it was summer academy session, district provided professional learning, wherever it took place, that there were multiple sessions on meeting the needs of learners who learn atypically from the others. The same would be true for multilingual learners. They were all throughout the summer. There are opportunities for that. Those include both inclusion support strategies, co-teaching strategies. They include recognizing the difference between a disability and simply language acquisition. There are multiple sessions that are held.
So do our teachers, given all of these choices of professional development, do they choose the sessions they want to go to? And then are, in particular, I know we have special education teachers, that's their expertise, but I also feel like, with my own experience, that general education teachers need to be introduced to some things in order to better support all the different learning styles in their classroom. Mm-hmm. So are we encouraging, do we have a lot of general ed teachers that attend the sessions that might seem to be more geared towards special ed, or do y'all capture that information as far as their attendance or not?
We would be able to discern that through some deeper research, but you've got a blend of things here. You've got sessions that are specifically designed for a teacher of special needs students to do particular things that are part of their work. And then there are sessions, the biggest, most exciting one right now is this whole business of universal design for learning, and that is all teachers of all students ensuring that their delivery can meet the learning needs of every student, can engage and meet their needs.
I think it would be helpful for Ms. Hogan to speak more directly to the training for special ed services. For regular ed and special ed teachers.
Okay, so the UDL is not a required training for every single person, but it's probably one that targets every single one.
So we rolled out, I'm sorry, I'm over here. It's okay. We rolled out UDL training actually right before COVID, okay? So we started it just a little bit, you know what happened with COVID. But this past year, we partnered with CAS, the organization that really, developed Universal Design for Learning. So we partnered with them, and our middle school and our high school administrators had cohorts at each of their schools that went through training all year long. It wasn't just summer. So their summer work kind of was an extension through the elementary stuff. There's been a lot of work through the academics department. We've been rolling out, we have a program called Goal Book that has UDL strategies, and a lot of that work is going to happen this year through the instructional coaches and the principals meetings, where they're going to be, because we have to introduce the concept, get the buy-in of everything. So we've attacked elementary a little bit different than middle and high, but especially here, it's more of an extension of what we've already been doing. It wasn't a lot of new. It was taking teams came together and wrote implementation plans. As we go into our goals conferences with the schools now, we will see those implementation plans, and we did give them the autonomy to take a look at, depending on the school, where they started. We recommended certainly English and math classes, and those teachers, and rolling it out, and we have right now, when we do the walkthroughs, they're the pieces that they're looking for when they go. So we needed to train the administrators on what to look for to support it, and have teachers as a part of those cohorts. So in the summer, you really saw an extension of that. The folks from CAS came here and supported us in training. So we did a lot with Gen Ed, but it wasn't necessarily listed as a special education, because we did couch it under the fact that it's good for all students.
Okay, so with UDL specifically, I guess are we still kind of in the infancy of that as far as rolling it out, or have we, are we?
Well,
I don't know how you're establishing what you consider to be implemented.
Sure. I would say that middle and high are further ahead than elementary, and that's because of just some other initiatives that we had at elementary that we're focusing tier 1. We're definitely focusing at elementary, strengthening tier 1, which of course is putting in some of those strategies with universal design, but there were just different challenges at that time. I wouldn't say we're at the infancy stage. I don't know if I'd say we're at toddler.
Yeah.
And it really depends. We've got some schools that are further along because they had some people already, had some training. We've tried to really take people where they are and move forward. I definitely think that the schools all realize it's an expectation. And again, there was a requirement for middle and high in the summer to be a part of that. I think that was your initial question, was about requirement.
Right.
And so, you know, we've got kind of a long-range plan. We also shifted it from the special education department to be an initiative for all of academics, and it is something that we discuss when we bring the principal advisory groups in. When we asked them in the spring what they needed support with, that was what they said, and so that is on our plan for the school year.
So if you have some schools that might be further along than others, do we have a way to measure? I know we have a way to measure. Are we measuring those schools against other schools that might not be as far along to just, I guess, really evaluate? This is really, I'm a big supporter of UDL, so I'm glad we're doing this right.
Sure. I think the best way that we're going to start with that is really going to be their implementation plans, okay? So when we go through the goals conferences and they present their implementation plans to us, will be an opportunity for us to provide feedback and say, you need to beef this up, or these are the things you need to be looking for. But that's the administrator really owning it and being able to roll it out in their building. And to me, that is step one, because if they can't see the look-fors, then they won't be able to have it with fidelity. Does that make sense? So I think we can compare them, but first we have to strengthen them within their own building before we're comparing them. We want them to collaborate. We have a few that are further along in her sharing the way they've done training at some of their schools with the others. So I know that in the principal breakouts, the assistant superintendents have offered that opportunity for them to share and give information to each other. Not sure if that answers your question.
Mosley, if I can, I think to add to that, the one of the things we're look at across the board, regardless, in our general education classrooms, if there is over 20% of the students in some sort of intervention, then you typically would have when we talked about this before, we have a core one issue in that. So when we go into those classrooms, those strategies Tracy's talking about with UDL, of course, are part of that. Will be more heavily as elementary as we move forward, but certainly in secondary. So it's kind of that combination of a lot of different strategies. We may go into a classroom where we see a core one, tier one issue of instruction. We're also embedding, I think, to what you were getting towards with is it general ed, is it special ed with the UDL. If you look at our curriculum maps now, we embed in our curriculum maps, which the majority of gen ed teachers are using, the UDL, a lot of the UDL strategies are strategies for special education students, or strategies for students with disabilities, or strategies with multilingual learners that are embedded in those curriculum maps. So it's kind of in that, I don't want to say in the face, but it's almost in the face all the time when teachers are doing their planning to consider, hey, are you thinking about your students with disabilities? Are you thinking about those strategies that are good for them, for the ones you have in your class? And of course, universal design for learning strategies are good for every child, doesn't matter if they're gen ed, sped ed, or not. So we have ways to measure, as you indicated, through test scores. To a degree, but it's hard sometimes to pinpoint to say this one thing that we're doing is what's making that difference, because we're doing so much depending upon the needs of that classroom.
Okay, so I think my questions are based on my experience.
Sure.
And historically speaking, in Greenville County, we have, and I'm going to speak at the high school level right now, we have inclusion-based classes, for example.
I'm sorry.
Inclusion classes.
Yes.
So you have your gen ed teacher supported by your special ed teacher. And historically speaking, even in classes that don't have the special ed teacher in support, you have gen ed, they function in silos. To me, they've always functioned in silos to some degree. Some understand the role of special ed better than others. Maybe that's the better way of saying it in a gen ed setting. And so I am glad that we are moving towards this model, because I have always felt there's a disconnect between, and we have classrooms full of kids who receive services and support or need that, and there's just, my experience has just been that there's been a little bit of a disconnect. So I'm glad, and I don't get in the weeds of your curriculum maps and all that. I trust that what you're saying is true, but
so, Ms. Mosley, since you mentioned high school in particular, at the high school goals conference, they're required to give us information. The administrators are. So you've got administrators and gen ed teachers, gen ed people in the room who are supposed to talk about their subgroups and how they're performing and how they're serving them, where are they sitting, what kind of strategies do they need. So we're really expecting the gen ed staff to become experts in that. But I mean, you will definitely hear them say two things. One, if you're going to move your school, you're going to move your kids with disabilities. But the other thing you'll hear them say is, if it's good for kids with disabilities, it's probably good for all kids. So those are the two things that we've really tried to ingrain in their thought processes. But you would see a lot more of that now if you were on that side of it. Does that make sense?
True. And I've also, I mean, keep in mind, my kids are almost out. So I know there's a lot of stuff that's happened that I'm not as familiar with. So I'm just going based on my experience, historically speaking. So Okay, I'm sure I have other questions, but I appreciate the time today. I appreciate the presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Cap, I'd just like to say that that presentation, even as a former principal, blew me out of the water. The level of professional development that's taking place here in our district is none less than phenomenal. So thank you. I know that's a huge undertaking, but I feel like it's very impactful, and I feel like it's one of the reasons as a district that we're taking the lead in our state. So thank you again for that. As I was thinking through that, I was very appreciative and thankful that, you know, we're thinking of all levels of our institution, transportation, food service, and I believe strongly, and I'm sure everyone in this room does, that every position is important and helps to move us forward and helps us to, again, be a leader in the state. One of the things that I was thinking about during that presentation was I was thinking about our teacher assistants, in particular our kindergarten assistants and our special education assistants. And they're extra teachers, even though they don't have the certification. There's no doubt that the role they play is that of an extra teacher. So I was just wondering, in particular for special education and K-5 assistants, are there opportunities for them to be involved directly with the teacher in some of these trainings? Can you speak to that?
On a surface level, what I'll say is that both of those positions participate alongside the teachers in any of these sessions that they choose. I would have to defer to Mr. McCoy and his staff to include Ms. Hogan to speak to any distinct training for instructional aides and aides for students with special needs.
And I would say, Dr. Stiles, there's probably less of that happens in the summer with the aides, because of course they're not on contracts. We would never deny them access to that. Yeah. Certainly if someone wants to come, we'd welcome that. I think you probably, historically, we would have less of that just because it is off contract time for them. Hourly is a little different, obviously, as you know. Sometimes we have a little bit more success, some of the stuff that my team has done in the past, still small, but where an aide will just, after school training, again, are off contract hours, but will say, well, I want to go with my kindergarten, can I attend with my kindergarten teacher, and would allow them to do that.
Yes, I just want to say that I think there's great potential with our teacher assistants when we inspire them and we support them and develop them, that perhaps they'll want to be a teacher. And they'll enjoy that, and I'm sure, I'm like you with contract hours, I'm not sure, I know that presents a huge barrier, but I wish there was some ways that we could provide them more opportunities, and I feel like that would lead to more effectiveness in the classroom. Just food for thought, but thank you.
No, that's a great point, Dr. Stiles, and I know, and we probably need to do some more of that with them. I know during COVID, we actually did, for the K-5 aides, we actually trained them on, when we had to kind of split those classes because they were larger, and during COVID when we were social distancing, we actually did some training with the kindergarten aides on some of the LI intervention that they could do. So I think there's some potential there for at least some of them that we could do, because we have, to your point, we have actually a lot of teachers that are we have a lot of certified people who are just choosing not to teach whatever reason, but they're an aide. So they have a great skill set that we really could tap into there.
Absolutely, and just like, you know, a teacher assistant, let's say for a special needs child, their knowledge of that disability would mean a lot to support that student.
Absolutely.
Just food for thought.
Yeah, no,
thank you very much.
As sort of a side note to that, we are looking at, I think we've mentioned this to the board before, not ready to move forward with it, but we're looking at a model with Clemson out of Arizona State that they're currently doing in Mesa, Arizona. And I think in another district out there as well, Jeff.
Yes, the next door.
It's an elementary model that involves a master teacher, 2 to 3 regular classroom teachers, and then some number in that mix of aides and or people still in school working on their certification. And you take a larger group of students than you would ordinarily assign to 3 teachers and assign them as a cohort to that group. And part of that is obviously, one, to address teacher shortage, but secondly, to build capacity and desire to go through and become a certified teacher. So that touches a little bit on what you're talking about, and we've looked at that in a preliminary way, and there's a group that's going out in November to look at it again when we have our consortium meeting out there the first part of November. And that may be something that we pursue as an opportunity to address both teacher shortage and to work with paraprofessionals to become certified teachers. Excuse me.
Mr. Sutton.
Dr. Oyster, when I'm looking at this, I see the number of sessions, the number of participants, the number of hours, but I don't really know what is being emphasized, the content of these sessions. I know there's a number of topics listed, but I don't really know what's being taught during these things in summer. If someone were to ask me, what did y'all do during the summer, I can't just list the sessions and the participants and the hours. I need to know what is being emphasized in this training. I know that we're doing these things for teacher recertification. I've gone through that myself many times. But I think it would be helpful to me to have some idea about not the numbers, but what we're actually trying to accomplish during the summer in that regard. There were two things that I was looking at. One, in talking with more and more teachers, especially elementary teachers, I find that they say there's a lack of respect for the teacher and that student discipline, they have to spend all their time trying to discipline, and so that leaves them very little time to teach. So I was wondering if that is something that we as a district are aware of. Is it a problem or is it not a problem? And if it is a problem, how are we going to attack that? How are we going to deal with that? Are we going to teach teachers how?
Excuse me, Mr. Sutton. I still have some people on the list and we're out of time. Without objection, I'm going to extend for 15 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Two examples very quickly. One is getting students to listen to what is being taught, and maybe how to work with parents on their children, how to get them to assist the teacher rather than siding with the student. And the second thing that was very interesting to me, active shooter weapon on the bus. I never thought about that, and I was wondering exactly what we would do in that particular situation.
What was your second? I didn't understand your second question.
We had an emergency preparedness active shooter weapon on the bus.
Yes, sir.
That was the topic, but I don't know how we would go about defending that. I don't know what's involved in that. I don't know the content of that. So that would be one thing. And the second question, when we had an active shooter, did we have an actual demonstration like we did when we saw it? Or was it just simply a classroom, or did you actually go out and see firsthand exactly what it looked like?
Both. It is both classroom and it's an active demonstration. As far as I know, we were the first school district in the state to do that. We began doing that several years ago. The only thing that interrupted it was during COVID, during the height of COVID, they didn't do the active shooter on board the bus drill. They did that this past year, and they did it in previous years, and will continue to do so. And we don't disclose the actual response to an active shooter on a bus.
And I'm
glad to discuss that with you in executive session.
Just so, I'd just like to have some idea.
It would be very similar to,
That would be dealt with, how that would be handled.
very similar to,
They asked me, how do you handle an active shooter on a bus?
very similar to what,
Yes, sir.
very similar to what you observed in the active shooter drill you saw in a school.
Someone is asking me that, Dr. Oyster, and I can't say, just say, well, that's what I observed.
Well,
And I'm just,
in summary, you can observe, you can share with them that our drivers are trained what to do by law enforcement, and they are also exposed to an active drill where they see what law enforcement does and how they should act and respond. And that's all we're going to say to the general public.
and I understand that, and I agree with that, but
Yes,
that's
sir.
not what I'm asking for, and that's not what I'm saying.
I'm not sure then I,
Do anything to please the public. I would like to know exactly what can be told to a person who has a child on the bus, what precautions we're taking to ensure the safety of that stuff.
what I just said to you, and we'll be glad to send that to you in writing, and you can use that to respond to them.
It would be very helpful to me.
Yes, sir.
And also, we need to look at exactly how well our teachers are being able to teach and not do discipline all day long.
We have sessions.
That may be just what was transferred to me. I don't know if that's really a district problem or not. And I have spent most of my summer with elementary teachers because I know the least about them. Most of my time has been spent in the past with the middle and the high school. But as I deal with more and more of the elementary teachers, that and I did not know, does the teacher have a lunch break? They have a planning period, but do they have a lunch break?
As far as the training for discipline issues, we have training in these sessions. This is 40-plus years for me. We've had teachers that have had difficulty handling student discipline since I began, and some teachers that never had an issue handling student discipline. So that's been a challenge for some teachers, probably for as long as there have been schools. In fact, in the 1890s, they had to shut school down in the city of Boston because the students were so out of hand in the schools, in the 1890s. So that's been a problem for some people for a long time. So if a teacher identifies that they're having an issue themselves, they can go to one of those sessions. If the principal identifies that they've had an issue with handling discipline, they can require them to attend sessions, just as they can require any other attendance in a staff development if it's pursuant to something they have identified to that teacher in writing as part of their evaluation, an area in which they need to improve. They can require that attendance, or for them to go observe other teachers that seem to be doing a better job managing classroom discipline. So I suspect we will also always have teachers who have challenges with that, who don't do as well as some other teachers in managing discipline. And we have a variety of offerings that will be helpful to them. So that is something that we address where it's needed. And if they believe they're having a problem that they seem to not know what to do with, how to handle, then they need to talk first with their principal to see what help can you give me? What training could I go to better my skill set in dealing with student management and student discipline? And one of the first things is, generally speaking, the academic structure in the classroom is the key to managing student discipline. That is, having a plan, following that plan, having students engaged and focused on what they're doing.
I really would like to pursue that, but Bush tells me that's not on the agenda. So me and you will have to get together later on that, Dr. Orchard.
Okay.
With you. Thank you, ma'am, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. I was just referring into the lunch period thing. Okay. And, Mrs. Wales.
Ms. Bush, I can barely hear you when you're speaking, but I did hear you forward, so that's good.
Ms. Wales.
Tell me a minute about the partnership with Clemson. So that was new this year?
That is new this year. It was developed through a principal pipeline committee in collaboration with College of Education at Clemson University. It is part of the pipeline research, and essentially we are able to support cohorts of up to 20 per year who do not have their administrative certification yet. So they go through what is a standards-based, nationally recognized program of ed leadership development, but the activities and some of the tools and materials are customized to our context, such that if they are working with something in the realm of instructional leadership or cycle of improvement, they might use our tools as well as the tools that are available nationally as they are training there. They also have the opportunity to learn in a cohort alongside other Greenville County Schools teachers and to learn from Greenville County Schools personnel. The very first course that they take, which is already underway, is led by Dr. Melissa Burns of Sarah Collins Elementary School. So she is one of the adjunct faculty. We will have several others of our school leaders who will either serve as primary instructors or as speakers interchangeably coming and going from those sessions.
So it's a collaborative venture where it sounds like, what
It's
I heard, I'm
partnered.
going to try to describe it in a little different way, but it's Clemson's programs. So they have their content, their curriculum, they have developed their supports, their partnerships that they already have, and we're adding and embedding some additional specific Greenville County School support with that. And so the adjunct, the ones that are serving as adjunct leader or professors, instructors, are they doing that specifically just for our program and our cohort? Is that integrated with other districts and other folks at Clemson?
The key difference in this cohort, we have students all the time, teachers all the time, going through Clemson's professional learning and their ed leadership degree programs. This is a partnered cohort in that every year we actually review what they have in that curriculum for a particular course. And we collaborate around, here's a particular tool that might work, here's how we do this in Greenville County. But it's an infusion of some of those tools to support their readiness. The program is a nationally accredited program. They follow national standards. This partnership does not change the content, the standards, or the focus of the coursework throughout the 2 years. Doesn't change anything about its accreditation at all, but it allows us to partner and make those experiences more authentic. One example, when the participant gets to the place to do their internship, we will be planning those internships with the supervising principals together with Clemson to ensure that the experiences they have in those internships are rigorous and deeply preparing them for administrative roles.
So it's additional support and kind of enrichment, if you want to think of it that way. It's kind of enrichment activities and more deliberateness in making sure that they're in what they're doing for their leadership, they're specifically connected to what we want them to be when they get out.
Yeah, it's a adaptation of their standing program, and basically we're providing the practical instruction welded with the theoretical instruction that they are going to provide. They've moved to more, for the last several years, they have moved to a more practical curriculum within their preparation programs. So we're providing that, and it just kind of tailors it more to how we do things. They run cohorts with other school districts, and generally the others they run are by consortium. Like I think they run one of the Western Region Piedmont Consortium, which is 12 school districts, something like that. But this follows all those tenets that we have that are common with the work done out of the University of Washington on successful school and district leadership. So all this ties together, and it is to a degree sort of a customized program to meet the needs of our district, but also to meet the needs of those students in it. And that's not to say they certainly couldn't go somewhere else and be a successful administrator. They could, but we're working obviously to develop our own internal pipeline because we got a high demand for administrators. And we're also seeing, as you read these reports nationally, I read one just yesterday that was in one of the national publications, there are fewer and fewer people choosing to go into administration in general, specifically into the principalship, specifically into district leadership roles, specifically into superintendencies. So we don't do things to build our pipeline. We're going to contribute to our own problem, and we think this is obviously a good way to try to further strengthen our pipeline, because the weakest point in ours has been traditionally induction, those people moving them from the classroom into an administrative role. We've done the most with moving people from assistant roles to principal roles.
Right.
So this is kind of, I won't say it's the final step, but it sort of puts into place one of the final pieces that we were missing, and that is really a program that trains these folks that are expressing an interest in becoming an administrator.
Well, and I guess it does seem like that's a big lift for someone who's teaching in the classroom to be willing to do that. So that's why I use the word enrichment. You know, it's kind of a way to make it such that it's more directed for them. They feel like they have a little extra support, kind of like our GATE program is doing the same sort of thing.
I believe, Karen, it's all here or remotely. They don't have to go to the university.
It's a mix of face-to-face, and if they are face-to-face, it's in town, probably at the University Center.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I think talked about that in our strategic planning before, about how important that was, and we needed more deliberateness. So I appreciate you guys didn't try to totally reinvent the wheel, but tried to make this better. So thank you.
Try to adapt their wheel to what we need.
Right. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah, all right. I still have one person on the list, and our time is out. I'm going to extend for 10 minutes. Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. Can you tell us how many trainings or hours are actually required every year in general?
Yes. As a standard, we require that every teacher undergo 24 hours of professional learning annually. 12 hours of that 24 hours is provided through the school principal or the school site, but 24 hours is the required minimum.
So 12 is at their campus, and then 12 would be
some other means.
Somewhere else that they could find on their own or take advantage of these summer programs.
And it's possible that somebody does all 24 on their campuses. You'll notice that there's a lot there that's done through the principal for school faculties.
When Ms. Cap talks about teachers, that also applies to everybody who has a certificate. So that requirement would apply to counselors, media specialists, principals, superintendent, anybody in this room that has a certificate. Then the other requirements would be, you didn't start talking about that, but the other requirements would be position related requirements. like CDL drivers, they have to get a certain number of hours. Then there are other positions for which there is no particular requirement, but like custodians, we require them, plant engineers, to go to custodial college. So some of those vary by position, but in general terms, what she's talking about applies to all of our certified personnel, and that would be over 6,000 people.
Well, I'm curious because if I was a teacher and needed to go to training over the summer, I would be disappointed if I wasn't paid for it, honestly. So I'm curious about how much would need to be budgeted to compensate anyone who's not salaried over the summer or being paid on the day that they would need to attend their training.
So if I can speak to a portion of that, if you may have noticed through the slides a repeat of particular titles, those distinctly relevant, in-demand trainings. And so you would see those that might occur during the summer, but you also see many of those occur on that one day that's district-wide PD day. Everybody is at work at that point. And so that's one way to support that, particularly when it's something that's distinctly critical to someone's work. If you also consider that at 80,225 hours of professional learning achieved across the summer, number one, knowing that some of it is required as part of someone's employment, okay, whenever they achieve it, but that if 80,000 hours across the summer is what they achieved, Dr. Royster would have to estimate the dollars, but that's a pretty serious lift.
A couple of points about that. One, I don't think you mentioned exchange days. You talked about using days during the year. If they go in the summer, they can exchange that day for one of the required work or professional development days for which they are paid. Teachers are contracted for 190 days. Students are in school 180 days. We looked several years ago when we were looking at the budget about doing a required and or optional attendance at summer academy at a daily rate, and I believe the total amount for that was over $5 million, Jeff. Yeah, don't hold me to the number. So let's say between $5 and $7 million if they were required to go to summer academy, which is basically 4 days.
And the exchange days are 2, so they can
exchange
2 days of work.
2 of the
attended.
10, yes. So they have an option of when they are.
What about hourly employees?
Hourly employees are, if they're required to attend a training, it is a requirement of the Fair Labor Standards Act that they be paid. So actually, most of the people who are being trained that are hourly, well, the largest training is, one of the largest ones is the custodial college. Well, they're 12-month employees, so they're going while they're actually being paid. Bus drivers, there is a budgeted amount to pay their salary for the number of days they train in the summer, because they have to be retrained every summer. Food service, they pay their employees for training. It comes out of the food service budget. Those are the largest training groups, and their accommodations already budgeted for their training cycles. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, if there are employees that are required to go to trainings and they're not compensated for it, I think we should look at how much it would be we would need to budget in order to provide compensation to attend trainings. That seems fair.
Excuse me.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Very quickly, are any of these hours applied to their teacher recertification requirements? Okay, so that plays major because a lot of times you have to go and pay for those classes. So if they're getting credit towards teacher recertification, because I know how that is, I have had to do that, and so that's a plus when that happens. So good for these teachers for taking advantage of this training and applying it to their teacher recertification hours. So thank y'all for offering these professional development classes.
Thank you, Ms. Levinas Wells. And for context, every teacher across 5 years has to earn 120 hours.
Yes, I know well.
Which is where that 24 hours a year comes from.
Yes.
But you're right. In our tenure as teachers, we paid for hours.
We did.
And
I
this
did.
is
Yes.
stuff we provide.
Exactly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
All right, all the questions, and
Ms. Bush, before you leave that, if I might mention
Yes.
just one thing. We talked a little bit about bus drivers, and I wanted to share this with the board while we were talking about bus driver training. We have the largest class that we've had since before the pandemic. We have now, we're excited about having 17. Now, 17 is a drop in the bucket when we're 70 short, but it is certainly promising. That's a much larger class than any in the last 2 years. So we have 17 in the one right now.
Can I say one more thing? Karen?
Apparently they're replaying the word.
There's an echo in the room. Very quickly. I
No, is that
noticed
profound?
on the gateway,
yes,
I noticed that you had, oh gosh, how many? 23 special ed?
23 special education teachers.
Oh my goodness.
Year that we have hosted those in Gate.
That is phenomenal because I know there's a difficulty trying to find special ed teachers and aides, et cetera, because it's very demanding and they go through a lot. All of our teachers do, but that's great. I'm glad we have this gateway and I'm glad it's being successful. 70 people graduating, that's pretty incredible, and that does help our teacher shortage. Thank you, Ms. Bush.
you're very welcome. Thank you. That's wonderful news on that subject as well as the bus driver training. And thank you for this presentation. It was very enlightening. I don't know how you jam-packed all that into one. As I said, as you've seen from some of the questions, we could do a whole committee of the whole on each one of these areas. But thank you for that. And our next item is board self-revision of board self-evaluation instrument. And I will turn it over to Dr. Stiles.
Thank you, Mrs. Bush. In March, Chairman Meeks formed the Board Self-Assessment Ad Hoc Committee, and he charged us with looking at the current instrument and helping us to decide if we wanted to make revisions or if we wanted to create a new instrument that was purposeful, meaningful, and would serve as a guide to increase our board effectiveness. Of course, as a board, it's always our goal to be as effective as possible. And since that time, the ad hoc committee has met several times for this purpose. And I'm thankful to report that we do have an instrument that you've had an opportunity to view. And developing this instrument was certainly a team effort. And as the chair, I would like to commend those who worked in that effort: Angie Mosley, Michelle Goodwin-Caldwell, Derek Lewis, Debbie Bush, and Glenda Morrison-Farrow. Though she was not on the committee, she certainly was an active participant and shared some great insights. Also, Dr. McCrary, a special thank you to you for helping us to take the information and to create an instrument that is research-based and will serve as an effective tool. Your insights were valuable. And also thank you to you, Dr. Royster, who was there with us in every committee meeting, giving us advice and answering our questions and supporting us along the way. We really appreciate that. We believe that we have developed a tool that will not only measure our effectiveness, but will also allow us to confirm governance team strengths and inform the board of potential areas for improvement. Identifying strengths and areas for improvement will allow us to set goals and also to plan development for our board. It is important to mention that as a board that we should model this type of self-reflection because it establishes an environment that encourages and expects introspection, growth, and continuous improvement throughout our system. Prior to creating this instrument, the committee members reviewed extensive research on this topic, the characteristics of effective boards. And from the research, 8 characteristics emerged from the literature, which made it very clear that school boards in high-achieving districts possess attitudes, knowledge, and approaches that separated them from their counterparts in lower-achieving districts. And I would just like to briefly share those 8 characteristics. First, effective school boards have high expectations and clear goals. They are committed to a vision of high expectations for student achievement and quality instruction and define clear goals toward that vision. Secondly, they have a belief that all children can learn. School boards have strong shared beliefs and values about what is possible for students and their ability to learn, and of the system and its ability to teach all children at the highest levels. Third, they focus on achievement. Effective boards are accountability driven, spending less time on operational issues and more time focused on policies to improve student achievement. Fourth, effective boards collaborate and communicate. They have a collaborative relationship with staff and the community and establish a strong communication structure to inform and engage both internal and external stakeholders in setting and achieving district goals. Fifth, they are data savvy. Effective boards embrace and monitor data even when the information is negative and use it to drive continuous improvement. 6, effective boards align their goals and their resources. Effective boards align and sustain resources such as professional development to meet district goals. Number 7, effective boards have team leadership. They lead as a united team with the superintendent, each from their respective roles, with strong collaboration and mutual trust. Finally, effective school boards have team training. Boards that are effective take part in team development and training, sometimes with the superintendent, to build shared knowledge, values, and commitments for the district's improvement efforts. These 8 characteristics of effective boards represent the 8 standards that you will see and that you have viewed on our board self-assessment instrument. Those went out earlier, and I know that everyone here has had an opportunity to review the document in advance and ask questions. I trust that everyone here is pleased with this committee's work and the document that is before you. Ms. Bush, this concludes my remarks, but I will be glad to answer any additional questions that I have not already addressed by email.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. And just as a forward, this is for information only, so you are asking, I just wanted to clarify the process on this. You're asking for feedback, not only at this meeting, but if anyone has any feedback, to bring it to you. Do you have a certain timeline that the committee will meet again before? Is that the expectation? The committee will meet again before we bring it to the entire board?
The committee is ready to bring this to the entire board at our next board meeting, and if there is some feedback from someone today, everyone's had an opportunity for feedback, but if there's additional feedback, the board will likely reconvene to discuss that feedback should revisions be needed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. The floor is open for questions. Anyone have any questions?
So this is information only. We're not making a motion to accept this. Is that correct?
It's information only. Yes, it will go before the full board at our next meeting for approval.
Well, I will just tell you that I think it's very well put together. It touches and reaches every aspect of what a successful board is about, and working with the district and all those involved. I think it's remarkable, and I appreciate the hard work and everything that went into this. So thank you all.
Thank
Thank you, Ms. Bush. I just would like to say and comment too on Dr. Stiles on the good work and all of the efforts that not only you, but everybody in the board put in to produce this document. And I would hope that we as a board will use this almost as our Bible so that we can be better board members and better respect for each other as we have different opinions and always put children first.
And no further questions on the naming of Blue Ridge High School football stadium time.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. You have in your packet of materials a recommendation from the administration based on a request from Blue Ridge High School community that the football stadium there be named in honor of Coach Jim Howard, who served the school from 1981 to 1997. If you look through, you will see supporting documentation from the high school principal, from the Booster Club, from the School Improvement Council, and a very detailed letter from the athletic director that outlines the accomplishments of Coach Howard. The other letters are a little shorter, simply in support, but that gives you a good idea of the reasoning behind their request, and we certainly support and recommend the approval of their request for the name of the Blue Ridge High Football Stadium.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stiles.
I would just like to say that I never had the opportunity to work closely or directly with Mr. Howard, but certainly his reputation is well known. And I know a lot of individuals who have the highest regard and respect for him. He's done so much for our community, and we appreciate him so very much. And as a result, I would like to make the motion to approve the naming of Blue Ridge High School football stadium in honor of Jim Howard.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to second the motion.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions? Any other discussion? Mr. Sutton.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I worked with Coach Howard for a number of years. Truly a good man, truly a good coach, and I certainly support this. I think it's very well deserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. And that's the end of our administration. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The next item on the agenda is Building and Grounds. Mr. Suddeth.
Yes, sir. We have 4.01 Facilities Project Report. Dr. Royce, I'll ask you if there's anything you need to include in that.
I don't think so, Mr. Suddeth, but Colonel Carlin's here and can answer any question that board members might have regarding that report or facility question.
All right. Mr. Lewis?
Colonel, can we get an update on the new elementary school progress that it's?
We are in discussion with the South Carolina Department of Transportation, the city of Greenville, regarding the improvements that they believe we need to make in the surrounding traffic patterns. In fact, we're working to schedule a meeting with the director of the Department of Transportation to further discuss the requirements they wish to place on that site. So right now we're on a pause because of that.
So those discussions have paused the actual work being done on the facility.
Yes, sir.
So at what point will those discussions slow the work down in the facility so much that we won't be able to open on time?
If it goes beyond 2 or 3 months, it's going to affect the opening date.
2 or 3 months from now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we get some more information about what is being asked of us as part of those discussions that's slowing us down?
We can. We're actually waiting for some numbers from CoTransco on the cost of what the the Department of Transportation seems to be wanting to impose on the district.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Sailors?
If I could pick up on what Mr. Lewis asked, be a little more direct if I could. Who's our problem, the city or the state?
Right now, the point of our problem is the Department of Transportation.
All of them.
And it's not because of requirements that the city's putting down?
We're not clear on the source of their extended requirements may be. We're working to vet all that out right now.
Okay. I mean, I'm like Mr. Lewis, waiting 2 more months is going to create an issue with the opening day of the building, which, okay, those things happen, been there, done that, but quite frankly, if the city's gonna get in the middle of this and start making requirements on things that we have little to no control over, I think we need to start building our schools outside of the city and let them figure out how to get kids to school. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't disagree with your sentiment. And it's not too late for us to pursue that, so we're looking at what that might require from a contractual standpoint.
Okay, Ms. Wells?
So I'm gonna reframe the way I see what's happening. And part of it is because what I know is going on in the city, and the other part of it is because what I know is going on across the district, coupled with other places where we built schools and have not given consideration to or collaborated enough perhaps with the transportation infrastructure that's needed. So I am not, it may be that this isn't the right site given traffic patterns and constraints and what's happening. It may be that this is the right site, but it's going to take a lot more money. And if you're talking to Co-Transco, then part of that's going to be getting some people to contribute. But I mean, the reality is when we add a school like that, it does create traffic disruption. And to build the school and then want other people, other local governments to take responsibility for fixing the problem once it happens isn't really a good solution. So just, being in that field and working with a lot of local governments, I like the fact that we're talking to people to collaborate on, okay, there's something that needs to be done. We recognize, I'm assuming if they're saying there's something needs to be done, it's come out of a traffic study, looking at trip generation and what the roads can handle, right? I mean,
yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. So
I think what makes this project in our current situation particularly frustrating is that, we had a high school there with 1,300 students. And this is not a new, it is a new school, but it is a replacement school for one that already existed.
Pardon me, we're out of time, so we'll extend without objection for 10 minutes.
As an additional insight into that, one of the reasons I'm reluctant to speak more specifically is we believe that the director of the Department of Transportation needs the opportunity to weigh in on our concerns. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to speak publicly about the specifics of those concerns until we've had an opportunity to meet with her, share those concerns with her, and she's had opportunity to respond to them. The other thing that's important to know is we don't select a site, we don't acquire a site, in this case we already held it, without first getting the approval from SCDOT as to the feasibility of utilizing the site as a school. And we had that from the beginning of this. But we've moved from there being no mention of some of the requirements that now have appeared that would far exceed any investment we have ever made in any road improvement. There was no mention of that at the outset by SCDOT. So we do collaborate with the city, we collaborate with the county where that's appropriate, where we need to do so, and we certainly, not only do we collaborate with SCDOT, we are required to before they can ever give the go-ahead on a project. They gave the go-ahead on this project without mentioning, oh, well, this will be unlike anything you've ever done before.
Well, and I hear you. In my community and where I live, we're dealing with the same sort of thing where DOT is trying to come in and fix a problem that should have been addressed 10 years ago, before all the development happened. So that's where I'm saying, Jail Man has been, we demoed that how many years ago?
We demoed it, I believe, 13 or 14 years ago, but
The school there since when?
from the outset, we've said it was the intent of the district to retain that property for a future school site. But more importantly, again, no mention made of all these additional requirements when we first looked at the property with DOT. And it's not right for the taxpayers of Greenville County Schools to be held responsible for addressing the traffic caused by other development that's been approved by various entities and coming after the fact and wanting us to address traffic concerns related to the other growth.
We could, and maybe you and I can have a sidebar about some of that, but I think it's all taxpayer dollars. That's the reality. It means somebody's going to pay the taxes for it, and it is an infrastructure issue to support us. If you remember at Burke at Monarch, Dr. Royster, at Monarch, remember we put the school where people wanted us to put it. We put it right in the middle of a neighborhood, and then kids couldn't walk to school, and that was an issue. So I think we have to spend some time collaborating to work out, because my concern is if we go put roundabouts out there, which DOT wants to put everywhere, that affects how what pedestrian safety looks like. Then we have to think about that, because we want kids to be able to walk to school, right? So I think it has to be, they have to hear from us and they have to know what we need, but I think we also have to, we have to work with them too. No local government has unlimited funds. So working together and collaborating and figuring out what do the numbers say, what's the road volume look like, what's the level of service it needs to be, and then how can we all come together and figure out how to make something that works for us and for our constituents who are going to be trying to take their kids there and aren't going to be able to, they're not going to be happy with it either. They're not going to be happy with us. They're not going to be happy with the city or DOT. So, I'm going to say it again, Dr. Royster, I was not saying that we don't work with and collaborate, but I'm saying things are changing all the time in Greenville County, as we well know, with all the additions that we have in place. And I think for each one of them, we need to be really thoughtful in the southern part of the county about engaging them early and then often, because things are changing so quickly with regard to development that we have to make adjustments for infrastructure. If our schools are going to be safe for our kids to traverse to get there, and if it's going to be part of the community, that's just an important piece of it. So I look forward to hearing, I guess, in 2 weeks where you guys are in terms of the conversation you have. And you're saying that's with DOT, this is with DOT we're having these discussions, not with, that we're trying to get some feedback from at this point?
We've received preliminary direction from DOT. We don't agree with it.
Okay.
We're taking that up their chain as we should do. And until we get numbers from Co-Transco, from some questions we've asked them, we can't have a productive conversation going up the chain with DOT because we don't have a number to quote to them. But at this point, it would be the largest amount we've ever spent anywhere on a traffic pattern.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mrs. LaVentus Wells.
Thank you, Chairman. Having taught at Jail Man and coached at Jail Man and understand traffic, and I know that was, years ago, and they did put a development behind it. And it's always been a school in mind that we would maybe eventually use it again. I can't understand why DOT and the city haven't come to assist the district. I know the district is going to work with everyone to make sure all the T's are crossed and the dots are there. And I'm really disappointed because here we are trying to take care of meeting the needs of this growth in the area and opening up a school for children to attend and make it as wonderful and beautiful and accommodating as possible. And you hit these road blocks continuously, and it's all about money. And Dr. Rocha, I just want to know, is it all about money?
Well, we have concerns about the dollar amount, certainly. That's one of the primary concerns. We have concerns about the reasoning behind the directives we're being given. Again, that's why we want to go up through their chain, as we should, before we publicly make some pronouncement about what we believe ought to be done.
But we did speak with them before we made that decision. Is that correct?
We've been in continuous conversation since we first identified this as a site for a school, as we're required to do, and as we traditionally have done. We've actually walked away from property. In fact, Bell's Crossing Elementary School is located where it is because DOT would not approve the original proposed site, which was way down Woodruff Road, which had very little development on it at the time that school was planned. So we've changed sites based on SCDOT's preliminary concerns about traffic patterns. We've revised traffic patterns. There's not been any school we built that we have not had to do something regarding the entrance to the school. So it's not unusual. And they're involved early on. Again, we can't move forward on a project without their initial approval. But when your initial approval looks like a certain dollar amount for project after project after project after project, and all of a sudden it's exponentially more, that's problematic.
I have a concern with that too. If they could focus on getting our roads fixed and move things along, we'd be in better shape. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
All right, just a clarifying question. So we're working with DOT because of things they've asked for. I don't fully understand how that's connected to whether we can start the work with the city. Are you saying the city can't give us permits until DOT is satisfied?
We may make a decision to recommend to you that we don't utilize that site. So we do not want to invest one dime more in that site. So now we would, if that were the decision we were to make that recommendation, we would utilize the design that's already been done by the architects and engineers. But we don't want to turn the first blade of dirt over there till we're absolutely certain this is what we want to do.
Okay, so we have chosen to put on hold the project until we are clear from DOT what the cost of those facility improvements to
and whether
the
we
roads.
believe those costs are reasonable.
Okay.
From what we believe initially, we would not agree to it at this point.
And I just have one more question, Mr. Sutton. Sorry.
Without objection, we'll extend for 5 minutes. Continue, Mr. Mills.
So you mentioned working up the chain. Do we have members of the House or Senate who are able to help us move that process faster, seeing that we have a 60-day window before this affects whether students can attend this school on time or not?
Yes.
And have they been helpful at getting us to move that process? There just seems to be a sense of urgency here that wasn't here 8 months ago when we started talking about this building.
Well, we only got the report back Friday, Mr. Carlin, isn't that right, from DOT?
We got the initial response from DOT in response to the results of the study regarding these advanced requirements on August 12th.
But we got word back from them on the requirements that we have the most concern about on Friday of this past week.
It was, last week.
Is it possible for this to be an item on the agenda for 2 weeks from now's board meeting so that we can get an update on where that is? Because I don't know that the facility report is on.
We might can give you an update. We can't go meet with the director of transportation until we have a solid number.
Okay.
And we're waiting on that from CoTransco. We'll know we would likely know by the time the agenda is set for that meeting if we can give you an update, but the update might simply be we've not been able to have that meeting yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Dr. Roche, I'm curious, if this does not work out for us, do we have an alternative site? Are you at liberty to say that?
We are looking at alternative sites as we speak.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, that concludes my portion of the agenda. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
The next section is for instruction.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. Our first matter of business and instruction is item number 5.01, Instructional Review Committee Pool Members. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Sorry. You have in your packet a list of individuals who submitted requests to be included as an eligible committee member for the Instructional Material Review Committee pool. Just as a brief description, your policy determines if we have a challenge to instructional material, a composition of a community committee to address that concern if it goes beyond the school level. And it varies by elementary, middle, and high school. So what we have traditionally done is established a pool of individuals, and then when we have a challenge, they are drawn basically at random because you have to meet certain qualifications. You must be a community member, not a parent, but a community member. Or you must be a parent, or you must be a teacher, or you must be a clergy member, or in the case of a high school book, you must be a student. And they're reflected by having certain numbers on each committee. So much like you would have a jury pool for a trial, we have a pool of individuals to serve, because you could have a challenge tomorrow, and if you only had the exact number of people that you have places on the committee, might not be able to fill the committee out. So we would draw a group for a review or a hearing. Then the next challenge that came along, you would not draw those same people again, you'd draw another group. So you have in front of you today, I believe, 256 names by category, and you'll see it listed how they're eligible to serve on that committee. And we present that to you for your review, your acceptance. The only exclusion we would have made, and I don't believe there were any, if they had not filled out some portion of the form, or if they clearly didn't understand the purpose of the committee. Were any excluded, Dr. Redoe? Okay.
There were none excluded for those purposes.
Any excluded because they were not residents of Greenville County Schools?
There were none excluded for those purposes.
Were any excluded for any purpose?
There were 4 who had served on the 2019 committee, and per the policy, they must be off for at least 1 year prior to serving again.
Yep. Thank you. So we present those names for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Royster. We have a recommended motion from administration to approve the attached list as appointments to the Material Review Committee for a 3-year term. Do I have a maker of the motion? Thank you, Mr. Sailors. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Have a second from Ms. Bush. Any comments, questions, or discussion on this motion? Ms. Caldwell?
Dr. McDavid, how is this pool? Do we have a public announcement on application for this pool? How does that work?
Thank you. We opened the public application on August 1st and ran it through August 31st. We published on our Greenville County Schools webpage. We sent messages in backpack, and we asked schools to include the information in their back-to-school information.
How many of each section of people from each board member's area? Or is it just the same people that always make application and get in a pool in order to be in a pool? So is there a policy on the application for this materials review committee? I mean, because I looked at the policy and I didn't see where it had any details on how to apply and when it happens and if we're notified.
First, you were notified. Ms. Fitzger's looking for the notification. Secondly, there is no prescribed method by which to do this in the policy. The policy simply prescribes what composition the committee must have, how long they may serve, which is 3 years, and I believe to Dr. McDavid's point that if you served, you must have at least a year that you were off the list before you may return. We did send a questionnaire around that solicited basic information about, their address and so forth. I think you may have been provided a copy of that. I can't say that for sure. It also asked some questions so to make sure that you understood what you were applying to be a part of. So all the people that applied successfully completed that. We didn't look at it and see what their answers were, other than did it show you knew what you were applying to do?
So the advertisement is, tell me again how you advertise for this. Is it just on our website? I don't remember getting this information so that I could tell somebody to apply for it. So I'm wondering how you advertise it. Is it just on our website that we're gonna have this committee? Because I don't remember. I mean,
But I would suggest it was well advertised because we got 256 responses, and I believe in the past we might have gotten 25.
In 2016, we had 97 in the pool. In 2019, we had 56 in the pool. And this year, we now have 256 in the pool. So we did spread it out. I think the timing was important to do it in August as parents and community members were looking at school websites and district websites, looking at involved. We asked our school principals to make certain that their school improvement council members, community folks who work with them were aware. So schools included it on their websites as well as our district websites and in flyers.
So it's usually in August? Is it usually in August? The first part of the school year?
We looked at the timing this year and realized that that was a good time to capture most people as they're looking again at our schools, at our websites, getting registered and finding ways they can be involved.
So the different areas, so with the selecting the clergy, do we go out and solicit the clergy, or we hope that they look at our advertisement? How do we do that?
The announcement tells that we need clergy members to serve on the committee. We did not go out to solicit. And with that, we had 16 clergy members to apply, and they represent various churches in the area as well as chaplains of the local universities.
Okay. I think Nancy, you trying to say something?
Oh, yes, ma'am. It went out to the board on August 1st in a memo.
As an email?
In an emailed memo from Dr. Royster, yes.
Okay. I don't remember.
It's okay. And we
But
also,
I wanted to ask.
And for the widespread public, we had Greenville News to publish an article about it. There was widespread comments on social media around it. So we did have quite a bit of conversation during the month of August about the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have. That's all I have.
Thank you, Charlotte. Ms. Bush?
Yes, that was my question was, if we had available those numbers from the past, and it's very exciting as a former PTA parent that
always pleaded with people to please participate and serve on this committee that, you know, they ran when they saw me coming because they knew I was going to ask them to serve on something. So this is, and I think it's probably too a combination of social media, a combination of, there was some good coverage in the news, and that timing of when we're getting in that frame of mind of the kids are back in school and sharing it, and it's great to see how many. I know I see that a lot of those clergy are parents too.
Yes.
And it's good looking down through all these that a lot of people are serving dual purpose, where they might be a teacher and a parent, or a clergy and a parent. I see we've got a lot of media specialists on there, but the thing that excites me the most is that parents are becoming involved in this, and so I encourage them that you don't just have to serve on this committee, because with this great amount of people participating in this pool, they might not get called. And so if you don't hesitate to actually put your name in on several committees. Don't run from your PTA member when you see them coming to ask you to serve on something. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Bush, I want to, Dr. Royster is remembering the 25 that he was remembering 2016 from when I was running that. We actually extended that window twice to get to that number, Dr. McDavid. So Dr. Royster's original 25 that he's remembering was from window 1. So in the past, we have had to really push hard to ask principals to put on Facebook and really solicit people to get those numbers. So it is this one was much more, the 250 was really unsolicited. That was just us publicizing everything out in the website. So Dr. Royster's 25 was correct from 2016. It was just window 1 of 3.
And I think that speaks to the discussion we've had. I know sometimes we would go years without even a challenge to a book or to materials being used. So, you know, it's very exciting to see parents, to see our community, to see everyone wanting to participate, you know, and taking heed to the call for that we want them to participate and be involved in this. So yes, I remember those times, and so it's exciting to have this great pool to choose from. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Thanks. I mean, it's a great list, and it really is impressive how many people are willing to be a part of it. I guess I have a couple of questions. One is, we also have students who participate in this activity. Can we talk a little bit about how they are selected and what role they play?
Thank you. The students who will be selected to participate serve a 1-year term that coincides with their assignment or their time on inner high. So every year that the superintendent hosts his committee, the membership of students will be updated. Should there be a challenge to a high school book, then a member of inner high would be selected. But those names are not here. That is based on the inner high assignment.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then when the committee meets, where do they meet? Do they meet here at the district office, or do they meet at the schools?
We have had very few meetings. However, the ones that we had over COVID, we had virtually, and we had one here in our district office, room A. The members came here.
So when we have a meeting here, does everyone who's a part of this group have to go through the same level of screening that a visitor would have to do who walks in the front door?
Yes. They do get a visitor's badge to come inside the building.
So what level of screening are those individuals receiving? Are they a level 1 volunteer or level 2 volunteer?
They are only doing the Raptor screening to get in, showing a driver's license. They're not getting the Raptor screening.
But these people are potentially working with minors.
When we're on the committee, we do not have students. We're holding the session here in this office.
High school students are on this committee, right?
We do. If we have a high school, we would have the students here in. However, they would never be alone with the minors. They would be with an entire group of committee members.
But wouldn't we want them to go through the same level of screening that we would want a parent to go through that walks into one of our schools?
The screening for parents is the Raptor screening. The screening for volunteerism is that they fill out and get a SLED check so that they can become a level 1, level 2 volunteer. We don't do the level of volunteer screening prior to bringing them into this building.
So we're requiring these adults to do the same level of screening that a parent would have to do to walk into their child's elementary school?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the other question I have is, this is a 3-year commitment, but some of these windows seem like they might, the individual may be qualified today, but may not be qualified tomorrow. So what role does the staff play in making sure that, for example, our policy says that in order for you to be a parent at the elementary school level, you have to have a student enrolled in a district elementary school. So if I'm a parent of a 5th grader, then is the district going to be checking that list next year to make sure that I'm a parent of a 5th grader?
That is correct, and that is why the pool is of value. For our last book challenge, we went through every name that was listed as a parent, and there were indeed students whose parents were no longer elementary parents. And with that, they were not excluded. So we went to the next person on our randomized list to add to it an elementary parent.
So even though we're approving a list of 250 folks, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be selected, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're qualified for the spot. That's going to be double checked before they're called to serve on the committee?
Yes, we will absolutely double check when they are called for the committee.
Okay, so if there are people on this list, for example, that are checked as parents that we know for a fact do not have children enrolled in our schools, then that's going to come up in a check before they're called to serve on the committee.
In our preliminary check, myself and Sherry Stokes, we went through Backpack to ensure that every parent, either by name or the email address associated with it, was a parent contact in Backpack. So there was one that we did not find, and it was actually a grandparent, but I personally called that person to say, can you give me the names of your children in the school, because I'm not showing you in Backpack. But for every parent on the list, we verified that for the initial acceptance into the pool, that they have a child or a parent contact for a child in Greenville County Schools.
We accepted grandparents as parents?
There was a grandparent who could then become a community member because she does not have a parent. So I explained that to her on the phone, that you're not a parent, you're a grandparent.
But the district is going to verify that
each
the people
time
whose
there's
names that say parent,
yes,
when they are called to serve,
yes,
actually are a parent of a student enrolled in a Greenville County public school.
Yes, because they will be elementary for an elementary committee.
Okay.
And if that happens after a 5th grader moves to 6th grade, that student may not be that parent may not be an elementary parent anymore. Okay. We had some who had elementary, middle, and high school children spread out, but we did double check to be sure their names matched as a contact in Backpack and Power School.
Okay.
You all keep using the term parent. I believe it would include the legal guardian of any child. So when we're using the term parent, that would also include someone who's a legal guardian. So in your example, if the grandparent were the legal guardian, they could serve as a parent. They could fill a parent slot on the committee.
So even though our policy says a parent who must have a child enrolled in a district elementary school, you interpret that to mean parent or legal guardian? We
interpret any place we have parent related to a student, we interpret that to mean legal guardian, because we have quite a few students whose parent is in fact their legal guardian. Someone other than their birth parent is their legal guardian.
The other question I have is, we have a number of community members here who are known to this board, some of whom have been removed from board meetings for disrupting our meetings. And so what process does this committee have for ensuring that these individuals, their behavior is in line with the goals of the committee, and that they're not going to cause a disruption there like they have done here where law enforcement's been involved?
Yes, without exception, we'll extend for 10 minutes.
With regard to the session, if they were selected at random to be on the committee, again, there's no guarantee that everyone on the committee would be accepted, but a person who expresses, I'm not sure you mean disruptive. If they have been disruptive and that is a concern and this board would like to not have that name approved, please do let us know. We will, if a person is selected and are and they're chosen to serve on a committee, if there's any disruption during the committee, we have a protocol of what's acceptable behavior, how we manage the session. If someone is a disruption during that committee meeting, then that would be addressed at that time. But in the committee meeting, every person has one voice, every person gets an opportunity to speak without interruption, and every person has an opportunity to voice more than one side. So we do not have an exclusion for those who have voiced opposition. But again, if as a board, there are members who've presented disruption that you feel may not be well suited for the committee, please let us know.
Well, so I guess the first thing I think I heard you say is that the administration reserves the right to remove somebody from the committee if there being a disruption to the committee's process.
That is true.
And so regardless of what the board's individual feelings are about these people, that's mainly what I want to hear, is that these individuals who have gotten comfortable in this room being disruptive and being asked to leave by law enforcement, that we will have the same right to remove them from a committee. They are not obligated to be there just because the board votes them in.
They are not, and that is why we have a long list of alternates that can serve in their place.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wells?
I'm trying not to have extra commentary. I feel like the policy that we have and the process that we're talking about don't align exactly. So I need a little help kind of remembering how we've done this previously, because the policy says the superintendent will review all applications and recommend to the board persons to serve on the committees. Those whom the board approves will become members of the committees. It doesn't say members of a pool that the district then selects and or can remove. It seems, so I'm trying to remember, maybe the policy just doesn't line up with what our practice has been.
Yeah, Ms. Wells, it's been a little while ago, but back in, I think it was 2016, we had prior to that very difficult, to Mr. Lewis's point, had a lot of difficulty, because if you go through that list and someone's moved, we have community members that leave quite frequently and leave the state or the county. The issue became every time we had a challenge, we then had to start that whole selection process over again. That was months doing that. So I believe it's 2016, Dr. Worcester, when we were 19 or 16, we first put I believe it was 19, we put the pool process in place, because 2016, we had such long waits to review books because we had to keep going out and getting selection to committee members because they aged out or left.
Which in and of itself violates your policy.
Correct.
Your policy has a timeline by which you must hear it, and by which a decision must be advanced to the board for its consideration. So we've done it this way for however many years.
You're 16 or 19.
There is nothing in your policy that prohibits doing a pool concept. If you wish to certainly amend your policy, we would recommend that you amend it to include that. But we find nothing in the policy, and I don't think Mr. Webb has found anything in the policy that precludes, so long as the seated committee is reflected of the seats required in your policy.
Well, I do think there's inconsistency, and, you know, I'm not going to be on the board. So y'all can figure out if you want your policies to align with your practices or not. I think they should. And I think when we have to make changes, we should make sure it's clear. The other thing I would say is, it seems to me like there's a lot of things that we're talking about, how we're going about this, that it would be helpful, and maybe this would solve that problem. Maybe it's not a policy change. Maybe it is an administrative rule, because there is no administrative rule connected to this policy. We have the form for the request attached to the policy. I think we should have, usually with our other policies where we have, you know, the superintendent will create a form, we'll have a process. Usually there is a rule that spells out what that process is. So I think we should have, at the very least, have a rule that spells out all these things we're talking about so that it's clear to us, so that it's clear to the public what this whole process looks like. You know, I noticed there is someone who's listed in this document as a parent who is a grandparent.
Okay.
And so I also saw that there's a name that it's only one name, there's no last name. So I guess I have a little concern that given that we finally have a big pool, right? And I would say, oh gosh, look, everybody decided they would help us. I don't think that's what's going on, but we have a lot of people on that list. And so maybe, how did, we got somebody that doesn't have a last name. Did that just get transcribed incorrect?
That may have been transcribed incorrectly, and I apologize for that. But the entire list that we vetted, we went through and we looked at the various roles. We did have our parents, our PTA, our SIC, our booster leaders, our teachers represented, not only the core, but the AP, the ESOL, the SPED. We have counselors, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, a dentist, attorneys. The pastors we talked about, the media specialists are not only from Greenville County Schools, the local, the employees, the business owners. We looked at engineers, college professors. We were able to vet a number of different areas. And for the community leaders, those who are affiliated with organizations that we know, and the responses where we asked them, what is your affiliation? We were pleased to see such a broad spectrum that covered Rotary, Habitat for Humanity, our public education partners, our Greenville Chamber of Commerce, Greenville Women's Giving, the Junior League, Upstate Circle of Friends, Communities and Schools, Live Well, Prisma, again, our local universities, our Bridges to a Brighter Future. We looked at every single one.
Well, and I'm going to retract
applicants.
what I said, because you're right. We do have, on that list, I saw leaders who you do kind of feel like we're glad, good. Some people are getting on the committee because they recognize we need their help.
Yes.
In a major way. We do have some that are on there that have been disruptive, and, but you got to hear those voices too. So I guess the randomized process, I'm trying to understand just the mechanics of, now that we have a big list, and now that we have, in that list, we have people who could serve multiple categories that we're listing that way. So we're not assigning them and saying, okay, well, you could be one of these three, but we're going to make you're going to be a parent representative. What's the randomized process going to look like when you have people who fit multiple categories, so we can really say, that's random? Because I would have thought you might have just said, okay, well, here's 20 middle school parents, and these are the people we'll pull from. Here's 20 teachers, and you would have already put them in those categories.
Thank you. So I work and talk with Dr. Jason McCreary, who works with us when we randomize and assign slots in our lottery, for example, virtual. And so we're able to, for each of those categories, clergy, district teachers, media specialists, parents, and community members at the elementary, middle, and high school level, we can create separate tabs for those. So a person's name, if you are a parent and a district teacher, our primary role may be that we're looking at the parent role. You'll be on that list, but you may also be on a separate list, because when we randomize it, you can serve either or. We are looking each time, though, just for 2 parents. So we're looking for 2 community members who are non-district. So we're not looking for this massive list. And in the randomize, when we call and we have an elementary challenge, for example, we're looking for 2 people. We'll go to the top 2 that come out on what the database does is it can randomize the numbers and give an assignment of a number. So we will go to our top. We will call, and I had Sherry Stokes do this last time. Once we set the date and time, it was important to us, as was revealed in one of our other challenges, that every representative category is at every meeting, if possible. So we will give them the date and the time, and with that date and time, are you able to be in attendance? If so, we will then mail you a copy of the text to read. Can you read this book before this date? And we'll give ourselves ample time to allow them to ship it and read it. If they are available on that day, yes, come on in.
Excuse me.
If you say I can't, then you go back. We'll go to the next person.
Excuse me, without objection, we'll extend for 5 minutes.
Thank you. So with that, we will make sure or try to ensure that every meeting that we hold has representation from each. And the randomization process is a database random number assignment.
So, and I'm just kind of looking a second. So I think the way I understand this then, for instance, if we have someone who is listed as eligible to be on 3 different committees, then they will be basically listed 3 times. And they would have 3 opportunities, I guess, for their name to come up.
We listed them as primary first. So the primary in the list, if a person is a teacher, we want to first try to include them as a teacher, because it's very different if you're on the committee as a teacher and a parent. It's very difficult to separate those. However, in the future, if you're no longer a teacher and you ask to be a parent within the next 3 years, you may still be eligible in those other categories. So we did not want to exclude the other options we have for you to be on the committee once you've been approved for the 3-year period.
So is that similar? So, because we don't really specify with the parent piece if they're eligible for elementary, middle, or high. Is it the same sort of thing? Since they've got a 3-year term, they may have children in every...
Excuse me, before you, please finish your question as well. Before you answer, Dr., let me speak to it, please. Go ahead and finish your question. Thank you.
Well, you interrupted me. So,
well, because if I did, Dr. McDavid was going to continue to answer, and I want to say something that I believe would perhaps lend some clarity to this whole matter. We will gladly write an administrative rule to outline all of those things that you've brought up. And if that is somehow insufficient in its clarity and depth and brevity, then you certainly can comment back on our administrative rule. I believe that would answer all the questions that you have about how we would do this, how it would be handled. We don't need to have people listed in there 3 times, because that triples the chance that they would be selected to the committee as opposed to a person who fulfills 1 requirement. So they need to be by 1 category, not 3 entered into the same drawing, so to speak. But we need to get all those processes, we need to put them in an administrative rule and send them out to you, instead of us trying to what if every possible scenario sitting in here today. And that's simply all I wanted to say before Dr. McDavid continued her answer.
Great. Okay, so I think that was the secondary part of my question was, how do we have, because you obviously have this spreadsheet that's bigger than this, so are we also saying that for a parent, we might use them on any, if they have kids in elementary, middle, and high, we might use them on any one of those, or have they been specifically assigned to a level of committee?
They will only be assigned to a level of committee that they have a child. So if you're elementary parent, you can be on an elementary committee. If you're a middle school parent, you can be on a middle school committee.
What if I have both?
If you have both, you can be on either.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that would be helpful, and I do think that a pool is better, to your point. Some people just won't have the time to read a book and do what they need to do in the time that's called for. So is that something, Dr. Royster, that you think, because you guys already have the process, is it just a matter of putting it in the format of an administrative rule that you would have in 2 weeks?
For the most part, the problem is we got 256 potential draws for a pool. We've never had a draw that big.
Right.
And I don't believe, we've not really had that discussion before, but I don't believe we ought to triple a person's chance to be drawn for an individual committee by putting them in as a parent, a community member, and a teacher. They need to be submitted
on their primary.
Well,
even if they might qualify under 3, then they have the same likelihood of being drawn. So there are a couple of things that are different because we have a far larger group than we have ever had before, fulfilling all these different potential slots. And one of the most important things that Dr. McDavid said is it's not just 1 meeting, and they have to commit to reading the book, some of which take obviously longer to read than others. The elementary book, not going to take a review committee long to read it. You know, a high school novel like this is going to take a long time to read it. Then they have to commit to, they will be present at every meeting So their viewpoint is represented at every point in the discussion and in its conclusion. So we may have people who are drawn to serve but unable to attend all the meetings. We need to go to the next person. We need to outline all that in writing so everybody knows how it's done.
Well,
Excuse me, so without objection, we'll extend for 10 more minutes.
So I guess, Dr. Royster, that you just causes me to ask the question. So I think what Mr. McCoy said was in 2016, we changed our policy because we just were struggling to have enough people in the queue and in the hopper. But I mean, would it not make it easier for us as a district and for you as an administration to further to bring that number of people down, you know, to have a different process to where you're not dealing with so many different changing factors or I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like we originally wanted just a committee.
Having fewer people. We've been in the circumstance of having fewer people. That's not helpful.
When I think 97, the Dr. McDavid referenced, by the end of that 3 years, even then for that last book challenge, we were moving through people pretty quickly because either they couldn't serve at that time of year or they had left the community, they weren't there. So I think the 250 or 400 or 600 that you get, the more we can get so we're not wasting time trying to find people. And then again, if you run out of people for a category, you've got to start that whole process all over again.
Theoretically, the larger the number, the greater the likelihood they're representative of a cross-section of the community.
So is that better than saying, to your point, they age out or they move or whatever? Is that better than just bringing back, like going through that process every year where you might reappoint or you might have new people?
Given the intensity of that process our staff has to go through, yes, the way we are doing it right now is the much more efficient process.
Okay.
Because I've done it both ways. I had to operate under a system where we basically had to do it yearly because we didn't have enough people. It's incredibly time consuming.
But you are saying that you are vetting, you are looking at that list.
We vet them multiple times because we vet them initially, and then to Dr. McDavid's point, when we have to activate a committee, we have to go through each one of those again to make sure they still reside in the county, they still have children in the right level, so they're vetted multiple times.
This is the last challenge you had. I believe you had to remove some people from consideration of being on the committee because they no longer fit the category that they were selected.
They weren't parents anymore.
And we did make sure they had kids. If they're parents, they had kids in school because we checked backpacks to see.
Yeah, we look up in Power School. We have ways of vetting every category.
Okay. Well, I think having all that outlined in administrative rule would be great. And I think if it looks like we need to tweak or if we could tweak the language in our policy so that it reflects what we do, I think that would, if you have time, Dr. Royster, Mr. Webb, to provide any recommendation there, I think that'd be great for that to come to the board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sudduth.
Dr. McDavid, materials, I want to know what constitutes where you find materials. Are we talking about textbooks, books we have in the media center? We're talking about teacher book list. We're talking about drawings and art. We're talking about what you see on the computer screen. Where do the source of the materials? Is there a limit on that?
There's not a limitation. Actually, there's a definition of instructional materials that our schools have and our teachers vet. So it includes all of the things you referenced earlier. There are different processes that are internal before they become external. That includes how we, at a school level, at a classroom level, vet what's on a teacher's library or what the teacher puts on the screen, giving parents an option to choose other textbooks or other materials if they deem something not appropriate for their children so that they are not all exposed to the same thing. We have other processes based on board policies in place, but yes, instructional materials includes all of those. Thank you.
All I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sudduth. Does anyone else have a question or comment? Okay, hearing no other commentary, all those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. The next item under instruction and our last matter of business is item number 5.02, the 2022 Summer Remediation and Support Programs. This item is for information only. Dr. Royster, I'll turn it over to you to present our speakers and to make introductory comments.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles, and I will simply, without great introduction, turn it over to Mr. McCoy to talk about the large number of instructional opportunities that exist within the district over the summer. Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. And actually, I'm going to be turning it over to Dr. McDavid and Dr. Stevens to talk specifically. They run our summer programs directly, both our summer school and our remediation camps. So I would just say as a way of introduction that you'll recall, we have the last 2 years really had a lot larger number of students in summer school because we are using, as approved by you all, some CARES money to pay for summer school remediation. So last couple of years and up until this year, last 2 years, we've had all of our sites, minus those under construction of some sort that we couldn't host it, have hosting summer school. So Dr. McDavid will report on some of those numbers that we had and some of the successes we had through our programs.
Thank you very much. When you look at the training that took place over the summer, our students as well were in training, ELA and math with targeted support. So we are going to share with you some of the information around our summer remediation and our support programs. That includes our third grade Read to Succeed summer camp, over which Dr. Susan Stevens served. We will also share elementary and middle school camps, high school credit recovery camps, as well as the demographics, and most importantly, the outcomes. In 2022, we had fewer, almost half of what we had in the prior year, of students who were identified for support in summer programs. You will see the span of over 3,000 students in grades 0, kindergarten, through 5, and the numbers represented in each grade level, as well as those from middle school and high school. We served over 5,802 students, we'll serve that number, in our summer 2022 programs. The demographics, our gender was represented almost 50-50, but close, with male and females. Our pupils of poverty represented a large majority, 85% of the students who were served. As you see in the ethnicity, we had representation, but the majority of our representation was from African American, Caucasian, and Hispanic students. Our multi-language learners represented almost 22%. Most of our native English speakers were served in the programs over the summer. So those are the demographics of our students receiving summer support. Our elementary, all of our schools were represented and served during the same 4 weeks. We spent 4 weeks throughout June 20th to July 21st. We were closed during the week of the 4th of July. We were open on Monday through Thursday. That was for all sites. We coordinated that support with transportation and food services so that all of our students, there was some consistency, elementary, middle, and high, for parents and for our other programs. We have elementary hours of support from 7:45 a.m. to 2 p.m., which included our Read to Succeed, which requires 96 hours of total reading instructional time. The schools are listed. I won't name those, but there were several schools, as you see at elementary, that were they had construction or maintenance projects going on, so we had those students served at multiple sites. Even though the students, for example, at Bell's Crossing went to Rudolph Gordon, the teachers and the administrators at Bell's Crossing selected those students, and they followed the students, and they served their own students at a different site. We felt that it was important that our students, as they're going to a different site, see their same teachers, their same administrators, and receive that familiarity over a summer program. So there's not the get to know you type of thing that needs to happen. So if there's a shared site, there were 2 administrators and all staff, they were separate. The middle school, the hours were slightly different, the same weeks of service, but the hours were 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., and the high school was 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. We were able to stagger the dismissal time so that our bus transportation with summer could get all of our students there. We also had a combination at our high school of some online support so our students could work from home as well to extend their learning hours. All sites received free meals, and we had nurses assigned to each quadrant, and as I mentioned, transportation was provided. Before I go into the outcomes of all, Dr. Susan Stevens is going to share specifically about our Read to Succeed students who are required to attend.
Thank you, Dr. McDavid. Good morning.
Morning.
A key component of our summer programming is our Read to Succeed third grade summer reading camp, which is a requirement of the Read to Succeed legislation, or Act 284. While this camp is run in conjunction with our traditional elementary summer programming, there are some key distinctions between those two programs. Specifically, as Dr. McDavid mentioned, our Summer Bridge program can incorporate both language arts and math instruction.
No, they can do their thing. Don't they do their thing?
Can I keep going?
I think they just did. I don't think she's reset it is what happened. We're not cutting you off. We
I can't speak
you.
that quickly. So our traditional elementary bridge program can incorporate both language arts and math instruction, as well as other content areas, if so chosen, depending on the different focuses of the schools. But it can also include both remediation and possibly acceleration for students, depending on who is rostered to attend. Conversely, our third grade Read to Succeed program specifically focuses solely on language arts instruction. As Dr. McDavid mentioned, there is a requirement of 96 hours of ELA instruction that is part of that program. We have dedicated third grade teachers who are responsible for the third grade instruction, and we consider specific targeted intervention opportunities for students during that summer time, and that includes the use of LLI for remediation, and also reading horizons if the student has difficulty with decoding and encoding and some phonics foundational skills. We have a very solid cap of a teacher-student ratio of 15:1, but in many of our locations, it was actually reduced beyond that. As a reminder that summer remediation camp is a requirement of the Read to Succeed legislation, but the Read to Succeed legislation also has several other requirements that actually encompass most of a third grader's academic year. There are many levels of targeted support and remediation and monitoring that occur throughout a student's third grade year, and the summer reading camp is really more of a culminating activity as part of that support. If we look historically at our students who are invited or required to attend third grade summer reading camp, you can look at 5 years of historical data here, and what this is showing you are our number of students who did not meet the state's cut score for SC Ready in their third grade ELA assessment. If we look back to 2017, you see that we started with 227 third graders who did not meet that cut score. And while we've made significant progress from last year of 710 to reduce it to 434, you can see that we have not yet met our pre-pandemic proficiency level. So while we are moving in the correct direction, we know that we still have work to do. When we look at our demographic data for students who did not meet the state's cut score for SC Ready, you can see that the trends are very similar to our overall summer programming trends. Our gender is about 50% male and female. Our ethnicity mimics that of our summer reading program or our summer bridge program, and our students in poverty is also almost identical. When a student in third grade in South Carolina does not meet the state's required cut score, they become designated as a Read to Succeed student. And at that point, we are obligated to go through a documentation process to either determine remediation or exemption or possible retention. And so through this process that is outlined by the state, we take each of those students who are in the 434 not met category, and we go through a process to identify their exemption or their required attendance at summer reading camp. And so that's what you see there before you. Specifically in this case, out of the 434 students that were not met on that cut score, 33 of those students were exempted through Exemption 1 with a limited English proficiency, and they had less than 2 years of intervention for that language proficiency. 204 students qualified for exemption number 3. They were students with disabilities whose IEP or 504 reflected their remediation and a documented lack of sufficient progress. 34 students qualified for exemption 5. They received 2 years of reading intervention and they had been previously retained prior to that third grade year. 18 students qualified for Exemption 6. Exemption 6 is an indicator where students have, over the course of their third grade year, consistently demonstrated mastery or proficiency of third grade skills, either through their unit assessments, formal or informal assessments, our benchmarks, our Faunus and Pinnell assessments, but for whatever reason, underperformed on the day of testing. So these students, we collect a literacy portfolio and we review that to document that they do have the mastery of third grade skills or the proficiency of third grade skills, and so they qualify for exemption number 6. Exemption number 7 are students whose exemption exists if they attend summer reading camp. So we refer to those students as having requirement for attending summer reading camp in order to be considered for promotion under the legislation. So of the students that were required for attendance, we had 145 students. And again, these are our demographic breakdown of those students. 50% male and female. Again, our ethnic breakdown are about 1/3 of our students were African American and 1/3 of our students were Hispanic. And again, our students in poverty ratio has been very consistent. When we look at the outcome of summer reading camp, for our 145 students with required attendance, 63 of those students were promoted because they met the required MAP score, the cut score as set by the state at the conclusion of summer reading camp. 58 of those students were promoted based on the literacy portfolio that was collected over the duration of camp and included subsequent work from their third grade year. 24 students were retained. 7 of those were retained because they did not attend summer reading camp at all, so that's an automatic retention through the legislation. 4 retentions were based on the student's portfolio, which meant that the district review of their portfolio did not show proficiency of third grade standards and did not show growth over the course of the year or over the course of summer reading camp. There were 13 school recommended remediation retentions, and there were no parent appeals to the retention decisions or to the retention process.
For the K-8 summer bridge programs, we looked at those 3,031 students at the elementary, 960 at the middle school, and we gave them interventions. We invited them based on performance, their grades, and what types of supports were needed. We served them and we did a pre and post assessment. This summer we looked at using K-1, our fast bridge, which is something we use throughout the year, as well as grades 3 through 8, a pre and post test, using Mastery Connect with our academic specialists, setting those 6 standards that students really needed to master. We used curriculum that was aligned to resources we currently use. Dr. Stevens mentioned Faunus and Pinnell, Horizon. Some use other resources they were already using with their students to help get them accelerated, and we kept that 15-to-1 ratio. This chart shows the fast bridge data. It looks different because we look not at a percentage or a number, but we look at whether students are high risk, some risk, or low risk. Our goal is to take the students who are at the highest risk in ELA and math in K-1 and move them to those with low risk. So if you look in the example of our kindergarten math, the assessments around number sequencing, the pre-test is in blue, and you'll see that the percentage of the students who were at high risk was around 50%, and we were able to drop that at the end on the post-test at high risk. We were able to reduce that. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we were able to increase the number of students who were at low risk. Some were moving from some risk to low risk. We were able to make that improvement as well for the group of students who had a pre and a post test. On the second chart, you see the percent of high risk for kindergarten letter sounds. We had a significant number, 60%, who were at high risk on the pre-test with letter sounds. We reduced that high risk down to slightly under 50%, but on the low risk, trying to increase that, we were able to increase our low risk by the post-test. That is one for kindergarten. We know that there's a developmental delay at times, but we'll continue to work on that. We did make some progress. First grade, we saw more marked progress in terms of serving those at high risk. You will see we started with almost 60% of our students at high risk, and on the post-test for first grade reading, we were down to around 10% at low risk. That is 15% at low risk. That is a marked improvement for reading, giving them specific targets and skills and using that FastBridge assessment, which they were familiar with from the school year. The first grade math, there are some considerations there, but the most important thing to note is the increase of those students who are at low risk on the post-test, which is in orange. Using the math story problems, we increased those students who were at low risk. So we reduced the risk of those students in the kindergarten and primary grades. Again, that's a spectrum that's different from a percentage only, but we reduced that. In grades K through 8, on the pre-test and post-test, ELA and math, in the blue on the chart, we give you the ELA for each grade level, and on the math, orange, we give you the math. We are showing that in elementary grades 2 through 5, if you add up the ELA, the blue points, you will see that there were 45 points growth overall in terms of the pre to post in elementary ELA. In middle school, 21 points of growth in ELA. Math at the elementary, which is in our orange, when you look at that, that's 45 points, a little bit different distribution of the 45 points, but yes, 45 points still overall. And at the middle, 34 points of growth. That is from a pre-test to a post-test for those students who were there for both. And we pulled that data from Mastery Connect with an assessment created by our academic specialists and administered district-wide throughout all of the schools serving elementary and middle students. For our high school, our students were receiving support, 1,811 students. They were hosted at their high schools. We also had some at Lifelong Learning and Satellite Diploma, which is at our career centers. We used our credit recovery labs and with certified teachers offering tutoring and support. We offered some initial credit as well through the Greenville County Virtual School Program and through South Carolina Virtual. A brief explanation, of course, credit recovery after a class has been failed. Our students do credit recovery to do specific targeted components of the subset of standards that they master to recover what they failed to earn during the year. Initial credit, they begin from the beginning of the course to the end and they earn initial credits. So of our students who attended, we have 2,878 credits that were either earned or recovered, almost 2,000 from virtual SC, 16 were added over from our Greenville County School Virtual Program, and 908 through Edgenuity or our high schools were hosting. From that, we were able to grow our graduation with 83 students graduating this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McDavid and Dr. Stevens, for that outstanding presentation. Ms. Lavinus Wells.
Thank you so much, Chairman Stiles. First of all, thank you for your presentation. I'm excited to see that we had 83 graduates this summer. That really is phenomenal. I'm glad these students are able to move on and be successful this year as they have started their next journey. I have a question. I know that last year we had 11,000 students in remediation.
Yes.
What is the difference from last year's remediation with those students getting into the program and this year with the decrease that is half, and it's phenomenal. I'm just trying to understand how did that gap occur, and then once you tell me that, I'm going to ask you another question.
Thank you very much.
I'll keep it minimal, Dr. McDavid.
In the prior year, in 2021, we had some students who were coming from virtual, some students who were coming through the pandemic who had missed significant days of school due to COVID and had missed some significant portions. So our schools use their grades, they use teacher recommendation, they use other measures to consider which students were in need of support. Coming off of the pandemic last year, as we had more students who had been out, our schools recommended recommended more students for support, as well as our teachers and parents recommended or requested more support for students in reading and in math. This year, our students have had, from the beginning until the end, they had a full year, and we had a reduced number that were in need of as much intensive support as they were given during the summer. The schools were very thoughtful and methodical about the grade levels that they presented or represented based on the needs and their performance, but the needs were different due to COVID.
Okay, so COVID played havoc on our students, correct?
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing you saying, do we continue the remedial assistance through the school year
Yes.
this year?
Yes.
Okay, so was that offered in the mornings and afternoons?
Both.
What about at lunch?
We have some before school, after school, and during. We're representing those predominantly paid through ESSER funds. We have students who are receiving remediation throughout the year. Many of the students who you saw listed would have had support during the year and in summer. Some of those were summer only, but we are continuing that this year. We'll begin by October 5th. Most of our schools will continue and pick up with those students who, now that we have new data, we have new students coming in from other areas. We're presenting before school, after school, and during school programs being paid through ESSER funds for academic support and remediation.
So we're trying to get them up to grade level or to exceed grade level. Is that
Yes.
correct? That's why we're offering so much, so we can help these students become successful, because we certainly don't want them to drop out.
That is.
So my next question is, you know, when you spoke of the third grade, the Read to Succeeds, how many, and I'm not sure you would know, but how many of those students were in the program last summer for remediation that were in the second grade and they moved up and they're needing more assistance? Do you have any? I know that's just me thinking, you know, I think about all that kind of things.
That is something for the 145 students that we can look up, because we do retain data on the students who receive academic remediation and summer in the prior year.
Right.
So we will get that information to you.
I'm just trying to see if there's a pattern, and if the younger are learning and they're able to move on out of the program, or if they're going to need it for several more years. That's, you know, Dr. Stevens, I know you're really into all this, and reading is so important, and ELA, math. I appreciate everything you're doing. I just want to make sure that we continue this, because the pandemic was very effective in the way it prevented many students from learning to be able to be in class with their teachers.
And Ms. Lewis, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, in the past, when we've looked at that, to your question about the repeat, typically when they're coming out, when you saw some of those growth numbers, you know, they may be in the lowest levels of does not meet. And so that summer program is going to move them. You'll see growth, but it's not going to move them out of that category. And so a lot of those students, when the schools look at their growth over summer, they're typically going to place them in intervention classes during that school year with a reading interventionist or a math interventionist. In the past, when we've looked at that data from repeat students, we only really have that data really since the board has approved through the CARES money that summer school for a large swath of kids, because if you remember prior to that, we only had third grade reading camp.
Right.
So we really don't have data multi-year on repeaters, because prior to the pandemic, we didn't have every grade level of summer school.
I'd like to commend Dr. Royster for turning the air conditioner up. My hands are shaking, and I even wore a sweatshirt, and I'm freezing.
It's cold.
So
it is cold.
I have no other questions, so thank you.
We're trying to kill all the cold.
Thank you. All right, Mrs. Mosley. Ms. Mosley, if you'll present your question. Thank you.
Thank you. You did call on me, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so Charlotte, I'm going to bounce around again. I'm going to start with high school. I have personal experience with this summer. I've spoken with Jeff. I'm just going to ask this question. Do we have a way to track how many kids are participating in credit recovery who are served by 504s or IEPs? And I don't know who
We can get that information if you're asking currently or over the summer.
I'm asking really over the summer.
Over the summer, yes.
Yeah.
We have the student ID numbers for every student who earned credit recovery over the summer, and we can verify and give you the numbers of those that have a 504 or IEP.
Okay, I would like that.
Okay.
I would also like to understand, and I apologize for not having the benefit of history here, but so I'm going to speak personally for a second. I have a child that has learning differences where virtual platforms, in my opinion, are not extremely compatible with his learning style. I would suspect that there are many who go through our credit recovery and or content recovery processes that struggle with the same thing.
Yes.
I am understanding that in today's world, our options are only virtual options. We have an Edgenuity program, we have a virtual SC option, we have Greenville County School option, but I'm not sure they do credit recovery. I think just the virtual SC did credit recovery. Am I correct about that, Jeff? Okay, so I also know that at my child's high school, staffing, not shockingly, was a problem because we don't require teachers, obviously, to teach or provide that expertise in the summer. So we rely on teachers who volunteer. So I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but I do feel like that was a challenge, at least in my experience. And so I'm fortunate that I was able to hire a retired teacher to help my IEP son through the credit recovery process. I recognize that not everyone has that luxury. And so I guess my concern is that, have we ever taught in-person, like, instruction? Because my understanding is the kids were going to school in the summer. We're calling it in-person education or in-person support or in-person school. And you have teachers that aren't subject matter experts or content experts who are supervising the virtual setting or the virtual learning that's going on with students that are not necessarily getting a whole lot out of that. We have virtual platforms that if you take a benchmark test and you fail it, and you take it, maybe, I don't remember the rules, but you take it more than once, it'll lock you out till you get it reset. These students are told that they can go home and it's self-paced, so they can work at their own pace, but the problem is if it's a Saturday and they get locked out of their program, they can't take it again until someone resets it, which probably won't happen until Monday. And then we're also dealing with a timeline of maybe 4 weeks of or an attempt to do this, maybe 8 weeks if it's through the SC virtual, 4 weeks of actual in-person support. Maybe that's the better way of saying it, but you have all summer to do it. I know that's a lot, but what I'm saying to you is, as a parent and someone's just looking at the process as a whole with a little bit of critique, I'm really struggling to understand if this is the best we can do.
So I'll maybe address that, Dr. McDavid, because there's a little history there.
Okay.
To the point that you asked about in-person. We did have in-person summer school for really all levels prior to there being any kind of, credit recovery, remediation, the technology.
Right.
There are several challenges with that. As you kind of mentioned already, it's a very short time frame. And when you're looking at only really about, I don't remember how many hours it is, but it's a lot less than 120 seat hours. Teachers in a traditional environment struggled to figure out, every child sitting in that summer school class missed different gaps of instruction. And so trying to narrow down from 120 hours of what they missed to what the time you have in summer school was extremely difficult. And I wouldn't say necessarily in that system either, we were always targeting the kids, the instruction they needed to be successful in that next level, particularly for those courses that build. The other challenge we had was that we just didn't have enough students to attend. Our numbers dwindled every year till we finally just went to the credit recovery / initial credit online virtual. For a while that was only online. And then to your point, looking at some of the critiquing who kids need a little bit more assistance, brought back to, well, you can come into person if you want to into school if you need assistance if it doesn't work for you to do it at home. Some kids do it at home and do fine at home, but they can do that. But there's others that can't. So, you know, we are tweaking as we can find ways to tweak it. I do think the last 2 summers have been a lot more difficult because it has been a little bit more difficult to find teachers to work in the summertime, just because they are, to the earlier point, they're doing a lot of after-school remediation already. They're doing before-school remediation. They're doing, so it's not required. Now, it's volunteer in the sense when you mention volunteer, but I do want to make it clear they're paid to do
No,
it.
I understand that, but I mean, they volunteer their time to be paid to do that.
Correct,
Yes,
correct.
I get that.
So, you know, it is something we have tweaked, but I will say that particularly with high school kids, what we found was even if they start out stronger in the in-person summer school, by the second week, we were dwindled down to such few students in that summer school program, just for reasons that they either had to work, they had to other interests or whatever it has to be. So I say all that to say I don't know that it is the perfect solution to that. I think over history we've tried all those solutions. I do think where the credit recovery or the content recovery comes into play is it does try to at least target, this is exactly what you missed, Ms. Mosley, this is what Mr. Saylor's missed, this is what Mr. Lewis missed, trying to target that gaps of instruction that you have.
And to the Edgenuity platform and why we have teachers of record and we are able to put it in Power School, we ask each high school to employ teachers of record for each content area. The students are able to work on site, but the reason it stops or blocks you is that if you've not done it correctly, we would like for you to have some direct instruction and support before you go on and just keep clicking. So the person who's your teacher of record, who has to be a certified teacher in the subject area, should be able or available to provide you with instruction. You can do it on your own if you're not able to come in. There are tutorials built into Edgenuity, but the teachers who are on site at each high school were available in addition to a lab manager, but they were available to provide tutoring. If they did not do that in a consistent manner for individual students, they weren't directly teaching, but they were there to provide that support. We did have the exams that tell whether or not you've mastered that content and you could go to the next level or the next area. We required those to be proctored. So we did not have those available at home to students, which is why the in-person was important. We know that credit recovery, there is an area of fidelity that we want to maintain district-wide, and knowing that our students who earn that credit the first time or earn that credit in credit recovery have indeed mastered the critical skills for each course. But the teachers, every high school had ELA, math, science, social studies for each course as it's entered in Power School. There is a certified teacher of record in each area, and we were to have those available. If there was a challenge at an individual school, please let us know. Mr. Reimer, I'm sure, can look at what challenges were presented for a subject area in particular, but we hired and have payroll records for teachers of each area who were there during the day, during that 4-week window.
And Charlotte, I appreciate all that, and I don't mean to sound negative. I'm simply saying that while all of you're saying, I understand the purpose for things, I understand the reason, I understand the safeguards and the things that are put in place. I'm speaking purely from someone who has lived it in real life and has actually had teachers from another high school like messaging me going, this is just you have something in theory and then you have the reality. And I'm just not sure reality lives up to the theory that you're discussing right now. I'm just gonna be really honest, okay? And I'm resourceful and I have means and I'm able to navigate this and get my student through. What I'm concerned about is all the other students that may not be, my kid, okay? So, my second question is, I see how many credits were earned and recovered. I'm grateful for that. Do we have numbers on how many were not?
This year, we had students who attempted courses in virtual and in Edgenuity, and the credits were added to their historical transcript after they passed it. So we do not have all of those that were attempted. We can see in Edgenuity which ones were started. I can get you that number, and Virtual SC, I can get those, but we do not have like offhand the number that started, attempted, either did not finish, not that they didn't get it, but did not complete, or were dropped from the course by Virtual SC. We can get those numbers for you.
Okay, and I guess I'm most interested in the credits trying to be recovered versus someone that started an elective summer school class and maybe didn't finish it. I mean,
Okay,
that's-
credit
yeah,
recovery, those who
recovered-
failed it.
recovered
Okay.
and or, okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna go back to elementary for a second. I'm looking at, I think it's slide number 13 with the bar graph where it shows our trend. Keep going back.
This one or
This was
yours?
students not meeting
Okay.
SC, that one, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at 2017 and I'm looking at, I understand the pandemic year, I'm looking at basically the trend going up of students, I mean, not by great numbers, and then of course coming back down. I do like the fact we're going in the right order, but I guess my question about, going back to the curriculum question I had earlier about reading, there's all this debate right now about balanced literacy over
Yes.
the science of reading, phonics.
Yes.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm on the phonics side of things. And I know we have training for our teachers. Are we, I guess the argument has always been, or at least what I seem to be reading, is that in a balanced literacy approach, is every aspect of it truly balanced? Meaning, are we putting as much emphasis on phonics as we should be? And how do we ensure that teachers are carrying out what they've been trained to do in that regard with fidelity? Does that make sense?
Thank
And
you.
so when I'm looking
Yes.
at these scores, or these trends,
Yes.
and
It
since
is
it's
cause
third
for
grade,
concern.
we're catching this in third grade. I'm not saying catching this, we're evaluating this in third grade to
Mhm.
meet that, to meet the, whatever you call it, law. But reading starts before that, you know? So
Yes.
I'm just wondering where we are.
I'm going to pass this to Dr. Stevens
Okay.
to answer, but with your question, do note that our students in 2022 were the same students who had some deficit in first grade when they were in 2021, and in 2019, second grade in 2021 and first grade in 2019. So those students started first grade during the pandemic, had the abbreviated year in their first grade year, had a disruption in their next year, and now they're third graders. So we do have a bit of a deficit there. With regard to our curriculum, the science of reading and balanced literacy, we are taking a look at our schools that have a higher number of students who are not meeting this SC Ready cut score for third grade reading, and we are evaluating different approaches to use with students who may have different needs, and I'll let Dr. Stevens speak to that.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. I know that you know this, but just as a point of clarification, when we talk about the balanced literacy framework for Greenville County Schools and what we follow, it's really just that. It's the organization of the ELA block into the reading block, the writing block, and then the language and word study components. And then within each one of those components, there are some different skill sets and different activities that include whole group instruction, small group instruction and remediation, or individual work. So that in phonics is a part of that language and word study. Excuse me.
Excuse me just a moment, but without exception, we'll extend for 10 more minutes.
Thank you. So within that framework, we really have a little bit of latitude depending on the different curriculum resources that are used to teach the standards within that framework. And that's at principal discretion and building leadership discretion. And our learning platforms, our curriculum maps, include different resources that meet the needs of differing student needs. So sometimes people hear balanced literacy and they assume that it is one specific resource, and that is not always the case. We talk about the balanced literacy framework, but differing resources and curriculum platforms can be used within that framework. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I guess the more I read, the more it feels like we're making a shift back to, or I should say, science is supporting the shift back to phonics
and there is a lot of data that supports that.
Phonemic awareness, and it's one of those things where I'm just wondering if we're doing more of that in those early years, if we would see different scores come third grade. That's all I'm asking.
And we have been responsive to that in our investigation of Reading Horizons as a Tier 1 approach for kindergarten, which is heavily based on phonics and phonemic awareness. And then again, some of the resources that we are offering to schools for evaluation and for implementation, some are more geared towards a science of reading approach.
That's very good to hear. My last question, just for clarity. On the slide where you listed the exceptions, am I understanding that the very last exemption 7, those students are required to attend, but every other student that falls in all of the other exemptions, are they invited to attend? And
Yes.
but they're not required?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and and you may have said this in the presentation, so if you did, just point me to it. Do we know how many of the not required students chose to come?
I would have to look that up for you.
We would have those numbers
But we do,
for you,
yes.
I would really like to know how many people are taking advantage, because technically they're still at risk, right? Because they're just.
Correct.
By
Yes.
law, we're not mandated to require them.
That
Is
is
what I'm
correct.
understanding?
Correct.
And each of these students, as well as they transition into 4th grade, they do continue with intervention.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. South.
Thank you. Ms. Goodwin-Coa?
Thank you for this presentation. I'm going to shift gears because I'm always about the funding. I'm glad that we have growth, that we're having growth in, with the summer retention and the before and after school. I think I'm going to ask Dr. Royster this. Because we are funding all of these with the CARES funding, Dr. Royster, what are we going to do to sustain these programs after that CARES funding is gone? Will it be the ESSER funding, or are we going to have to put it in our budget in order for us to sustain these kind of programs? Because we are seeing growth in them. So what will we be asked to do in a couple of years, probably, after the CARES funds?
Part of that will be driven by, in a few minutes, after you have lunch and have a break, we're going to look at the test score data.
Okay.
Which indicates we have fewer and fewer students that will need these interventions. Now, we had these interventions before we ever had a pandemic, and we will likely always have to have them. They were funded prior to that time. There's a little bit of special revenue from the state, primarily for Read to Succeed. The rest of it came out of general fund appropriations that still exist in the general fund budget. So it will simply be gauged on an annual basis. And if we believe that we need to request additional general fund funding after the CARES Act, which the expenditures for it have to be concluded by September of 24, but basically they need to conclude with the 23-24 school year with that summer. Mm-hmm. So going forward, which would be the summer of 25, would be when we'd need to look at that. And what we would hope is it will continue to make the kind of progress that we saw this year with our student achievement, so it will lessen the need for it. Just like we had interventionists in the schools, we've had those since 2013 or 14.
Yeah, those are just interventionists.
That's always been based on how many students were showing at the lowest level of assessment.
Yeah, the RTI, the interventionists
right,
and stuff.
That changed every year. We'd ask for a few more based on.
But what I'm asking about are these programs, because I know when I was in the school district, that Title I, we funded our after-school programs and stuff like that, but some of the other schools didn't have those programs. So now that we have this funding, and we have didn't you say all of the schools have it?
Yeah, we had something at every school.
So how are we going to fund it?
Having some kind of renovation project.
Yeah.
Over the summer.
So I'm looking at how are we going to sustain this? How are we going to keep it going?
It's too early to say that because, again, we're talking about the 24-25 school year. So we don't yet have any idea what an estimate of sustaining that would look like. And there's different factors that go into sustaining it. One thing Mr. McCoy mentioned earlier in response to another question, we didn't have programs at every school in the summer because, quite honestly, we didn't have enough students to take advantage of those programs to make it cost-effective to operate them. We couldn't operate like a summer class with 10 students in it, so we had to centralize them, which we can do by providing transportation. But until we actually get closer to that time, it's too hard to say what we might recommend because we have no clue what the number would be and where they would be in the greatest concentrations.
But I know we've always had that achievement gap, even at the high flying schools, that it wasn't available. So I'm just looking, future.
Yeah, and I think
If it's going to be available for
future,
all of that.
I just think how that looks and what it costs, we're too far away from that point in time, because we'll continue to spend the CARES Act right up until the end of the summer of 24. So right now for the next 2 summers, we don't have to be concerned about cost.
And we are spending some ESSER funds in it too, right?
CARES Act, ESSER funds, we kind of use the same term to refer to all of them.
And we didn't put this in the presentation. We are seeing a reduction. We had 11,000 in summer school last year. I think it was 8,000 this year. So we are seeing, to Dr. Royster's point, our expectation is with the intensive remediation we're doing during school and summer, that those numbers will continue to go down. And then we'll have a better idea in 24 to say, well, we feel like we need to serve 3,000 kids that cost this much money going forward.
What about the Read to Succeed? Do you see that as eventually being extinguished?
You mean the summer school?
Yeah.
Well, it's state law that we have it, so I think as long as we have those kids, now again, Ms. Mosley kind of pointed this out, but the 4 and 34 that you see there, those are the kids that were just straight through SC Ready, didn't make the cut. But then when you go to that other page, you see a lot of them have exemptions of why they didn't meet that score, ML populations, all that. So you're always going to have a number of kids that I would say that would need to have that remediation.
Right.
A lot of those kids too, when you look at it, a lot of those kids we've never had but 1 year. Particularly in certain of our schools, they just moved in 2nd grade or right at 3rd grade. So we didn't have an opportunity to have 3 years with them. So there's always going to be a cohort that we need that summer school for.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. There are no other questions. So, excuse me, I didn't see you. Ms. Wells?
Sorry, you're paying close attention, so I didn't want to interrupt you to wave at you. So I just have a couple of questions. One is, I need help understanding that graph.
Some risk, no risk?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Charlotte, before you begin, we need to extend for, how many minutes do you need, Ms. Wells?
I have 3 questions.
So let's extend for 15 minutes.
15. I'll try to go fast, or depends on. Not possible. If Dr. McDavid's really good at her interventions, she can help me understand the, it's that high to low risk graph. I'm trying to read that and understand what it's saying to me.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with kindergarten. And I'm looking at numbers from my chart that I used to make the graph, but I'm trying to depict that in a way that's easy to understand. And it's harder to understand this way, I know. But when we give the pretest, it does only put the kids in a category of high risk, some risk, and low risk. High risk are students who are at the 15th percentile nationally based on FastBridge results for that particular area. Some risk are students between the 15th and the 39th percentile, and low risk are students between the 40th percentile and somewhere above. So those kids with low risk are somewhere around the mid nationally performing in this area based on their grade level, their age, and the skills they're being presented.
Each one of these is representing a group of students.
Yes.
Right, so then you have a group of students that are the high-risk students, and that's in that first data point under kindergarten math number sequencing.
Yes, so I will tell you for that one, we had for number sequencing, we had 70 students who were at high risk at the beginning. We had 36 students who were at high risk at the end. Now, we did have a shift in the total tested. We had some that began the pre-test. It wasn't required for kindergarten promotion, but we had 214 students at the beginning, 151 at the end. So I reported the percentages to give you the notion of what percentage of our students were still at high risk. When we got to the end, we had more students in the low risk category. We had for post-test in number sequencing and math, we had 70 kids at the end who were in low risk, as opposed to 70 kids at the beginning who were at high risk. And that is what we seek to do, to shift them from that performance percentile from low risk, again, 15th percentile or below, to try to get them to, if not some risk, but mainly low risk, because that means that student goes back to the next grade level. They go to first grade or to second grade more prepared to interact with that material as a result of what they did in the summer. And with first grade, similarly, you see that, the first grade math story problems. We started out on the pre-test. The risk, we had 128 students who were at high risk at the beginning in math story problems. And then we had 46 students at the end who were at high risk. We want the students to not be at high risk. We want them at low risk. So on those same assessments, by the end, math story problems, there were 79% of them at low risk in that one area. So that's the focus, is to get them performing better in a group or chunk in percentile.
So what does this say to you in terms of how well we did moving those kids from high risk to low risk?
This says to me that we shifted students, especially those who were there from the beginning until the end, who stayed all 4 weeks. We shifted a good number of kids from either high risk to some risk or high risk to low risk. But in each case, we increased the number of students who were at low risk in every single area of kindergarten and first grade as measured by FastBridge for ELA and math.
Because on the first grade math, when it goes above 100%, that's why I couldn't quite figure out how to understand the data with the.
And with that, it's because of the number of students that changed, the number of students who were there from the beginning to the end, so it shot it up a little bit higher.
And so then the other question, on the next slide, we show the amount of growth. And I guess my question is, what does 45 points of growth mean?
The 45.
What does that equate to? What is,
and I added those. From second grade, who gained 1 point, third grade, 13 points, fourth grade, 4 points, and fifth grade in ELA, you saw the biggest jump of 27 points. That's what that 45 points means. But it differs at different grade levels and different subject areas.
So all you did there for those numbers is you just were accumulating across
grades,
second to eight, those number. And I guess in that, when you look at the growth, did you meet your expectation of what you thought we could achieve? Or, kind of back to the question of how effective do we feel like these remediation supports that we have are? I mean, we're talking about do we continue them, or how do we do it, or do we need to, but do we think the ones we had were effective?
We have analyzed, and I would need to talk to Jason McCurry in a little more detail, but when we look at it, if the pre and post, if there's a difference of 10 points, that would be the equivalent of in schools, if you did it and you did A, B, C, or D, that'd be the equivalent. Moving 10 points is considered a significant gain. And so in most grade levels, you saw 10 points growth, and our ELA was a little bit lower, especially at the middle levels in terms of that growth from the pre to the post, but that's a composite. We did have some students who posted more significant gains than others, but this was our overall. And yes, we did consider this to be successful. Still room always to grow, but we considered this to be successful for a full 4-week program.
Well, and I think for you to say a 10-point, you consider a 10-point gain to be a grade
Yes,
level.
yes.
Gaining a grade or a grade.
We say it's significant. We don't say the whole grade level, but we
not a grade level, but a grade.
Yes.
Like A grade.
Yes,
A, B,
of
C, D,
improvement.
kind of a, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So that makes sense. So then, it's interesting, Miss Mosley, the questions that she was kind of asking and talking about, because, I'm not an educator, but even in my time on the board, the 12 years when we moved to balanced literacy, there was all this conversation about, should we leave phonics? Should we keep phonics? So it seems like it's this sort of revolving process where we kind of go to one side and then we come back to the other side, and just every generation of kids or something. But I guess there's that two-piece where, and especially with kids that are the achievement gap, I think what I remember us talking about is we do want kids to learn how to read, but what we want to be, the reason the balanced literacy is powerful is because, particularly if you're addressing the gap in achievement, you're trying to teach the kids, you want them to have comprehension.
Yes.
As much as you want them to understand the phonics of it. And it seems like more and more, that really is the more important piece, because if they can read the words, but they can't comprehend, then it's not going to be as helpful. So it's just interesting in the data as we're analyzing. I guess y'all, what is that saying? Because you said it looks like the data is suggesting that a phonics-based approach now is the way we should be doing this. But are we talking about changing that and losing?
Let me answer that question, Ms. Wells, because I want to go back to what Dr. Stevens said about the framework. We use the balanced literacy framework, but we are very much in and out of multiple models based on the student. If a student needs, and we've always, the last couple of years, we've been heavily focused on looking at where do we need with the reading horizons, where do we need to embed more phonics, where do we need to embed more whatever instruction happens to be. So while we follow that balanced literacy framework, every individual kid is different. And so those strategies, I don't like to prescribe to a specific model that's out there. It's really, we do what's best for the students. And there are certainly science of reading strategies that you'll find in our schools because that's what's best for that child or that group of children that are struggling. So that's something we're constantly looking at. That's something we're constantly reassessing as to what our schools need based on the data that we have. And I think you'll see in a little bit when you go out to look at the data, I think you'll see that the growth we've had in the areas we've had, that strategy has been working.
I don't know if y'all said it before, if I just internalized it to that all the growth we've seen in closing up that achievement gap has come because of some of these strategies where we're not just thinking about what do we have to teach the child right now, but what is that they're going to need when they start reading to learn instead of just learning to read.
Correct.
Yes. And so with the data that we're able to gather, all of our students take FastBridge in K in 1. And our assistant superintendents can share, when you see this afternoon, some of our schools that have made the most significant growth or gains, they have a very individualized approach to what students need. And they are looking specifically at who needs more support in phonics, who needs more support in comprehension. And they're using the tools that we've vetted and have researched evidence that it works. They're using various tools for various students in different components of the balanced literacy model. But I think you'll see that more in terms of unique cases.
Right. So then just the other question I would ask, because it didn't quite line up for me. So GCS virtual school, so we had 16 credits. I mean, don't we normally have a lot more than that, right?
So I used the primary database, which was PowerSchool. I spoke with Laura Hurd, who is the administrator with the program, the registrar, and we had more students who, she says, earned the credits. The guidance counselors have a longer window to submit those and put those into PowerSchool, but for me to give you a set number, I could only use that knowledge of what I had that was in PowerSchool. So I've got to go back and look at hers. Some listed GCS virtual as the source of that student credit, some listed the school name, and we are working on those, but I used the PowerSchool database to give you the primary source information.
Because, I mean, usually we have several hundred in that GCS virtual program, and we usually have several hundred credits that are assigned. So I was just, that didn't quite make sense to me when I saw it. So, so is that something
I'll send you that right after this is over. I have it.
Okay.
I have what she listed.
I mean, so you have, is it in hundreds? Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. My computer just died. I have to grab the other device. But
that's fine. Okay. Well, I guess just that was going to be a point of concern if there was something that had changed with virtual, but we're still meeting the same sort of needs and getting the same sort of gains out of our GCS virtual school that we have gotten every year. Right?
Primarily for initial credit with them too. So yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'll ask one last time. Okay, there are no other questions, so Chairman Meeks, I'm going to turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. And before we adjourn this part of the meeting, I would like to thank you and your committee on your work on the evaluation form. Thank y'all very much. It looks real good. Didn't have many questions, so it looks like it'll go pretty good. Lunch is here, so we will adjourn, and then we'll reconvene our workshop in about, how long will it take y'all to set up?
I think 30 minutes is plenty of time.
Okay, we'll reconvene at 12:45. 12:45. Yes, sir.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. All right.
So we're not coming back in here.